ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into Part 1 of the series. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Kota looked in horror when he saw Izuku fly in from the wood line and bounce like he was thrown. Izuku quickly got up facing the wood line when 3 Nomu exploded out after him. His left arm hung limply, but he didn't back down. If anything, he looked more determined. All of the villains froze when they saw him fighting against 3 Nomu. Kota screamed out, "Izuku, please run." Izuku turned his head slightly and saw Kota's face racked with fear and made his decision. This ends now. Izuku charged the 3 Nomu as they rushed towards him. He waited until they were within 10 feet and yelled enough. He canceled their quirks and shot spikes out from the ground at the same time. The spikes shot into the Nomu's legs, stomach, and arms. This time they weren't able to heal themselves. Izuku began using his quirk to seal the Nomu in rocks, and then he fused the rocks together, making one big boulder. Dabi couldn't believe his eyes. Izuku beat the Nomu and was probably the one that made Muscular scream out in fear. He hit a button on his collar, and a black ink came out of his mouth, and he was gone. Toga was enraptured when she saw how busted up Izuku looked when he was fighting the Nomu when the ink took her away. It was the same for the rest of the villains, except the Nomu. When they reappeared in the hideout, Tamura was waiting and asked where was Izuku and where his Nomu. Toga got up and said Izuku beat the Nomu and asked the rest of her team, "Did you see how he looked? I want him." "Control yourself, Toga." Dabi said that he looked at Tamura and said, "You didn't tell us how strong he was." He fought 3 Noma by himself, and he made Muscular scream out in fear. Tamura screamed out in frustration. He cheated again. "Father, what is his quirk?" A crackle come out of the radio and said, "Don't worry about that, Tamura. Just keep trying to capture him." Dabi, how close were the Noma to him when he was able to beat them? The voice from the radio asked. They were about 10 feet from him when the spikes shot out of the ground, but they weren't able to heal themselves, Dabi said. "You're improving," the voice said. "That's good. Show me what you can do, son." Tamura, have your men rest and come up with a new plan. Keep trying. These failures will only make you stronger and smarter. Izuku dropped to his knees and yelled out in pain when the Nomu finally stopped trying to escape. All of the staff and students were now staring at Izuku as he breathed heavy, holding his limp arm with his working one. Aizawa looked at Ragdoll and said, "Please get accountability of everyone, and if anyone is missing, let me know." The girls of 1 were running towards Izuku, while the girls of Class 1B were looking in sheer amazement. The boys of Class 1A went to go check on Izuku. Bakugo looked at him with disdain, wondering would he disappear again like he did the last time. When Professor Aizawa got to Izuku, he had to ask the students to let him through. Momo was the first to get to him. She was kneeling in front of him, performing first aid by placing his arm in a splint. Professor Aizawa looked at Izuku and said, "You really push yourself hard." Izuku lowered his head. "I got sloppy. I didn't hear the third one sneaking up on me until it was almost too late," Izuku said. "You did well today. You managed to save Kota from Muscular," Aizawa said. Momo gently placed her hands on both of Izuku's cheeks and lifted his face and said, "You saved me from that, Noma. Thank you." Izuku began to blush and felt pain as someone began hugging him. When Izuku looked, it was Kota hugging him. "Thank you, Izuku," Kota said. "You're welcome," Izuku said. "I think I need to rest now," as he closed his eyes and his world went black. Izuku fell forward right into Momo's chest, and she pulled him in her, keeping him from falling to the ground. Momo held on to him until Achiko touched him, and he began to float and said, "I'll take care of him now." Mineta got angry. "Even when he's passed out, he gets all of the attention," he said. Achiko gently rolled him over so his head was facing up, and she was now on his uninjured side. She gently guided him back to the nurse's office and placed him on a bed, got a blanket out of the locker, and covered him up. Not long after heroes began showing up, All Might being the first to arrive. After getting briefed by Aizawa, he went straight to the nurse's office to find Kota by the door guarding it. When he entered the room, 4 girls sitting by the bed that Izuku was in. Mina was the first to see All Might enter the room, and she placed her finger to her lips, then spoke softly, "He's asleep." The other girls turned to see who it was this time. They had been keeping all of the other students from waking him up, mostly the girl from Class 1B. All Might smiled at the sight of these 4 girls watching over his son. He didn't think anyone could get close enough to his son, even if they tried right now, him included. "How is he doing?" All Might asked. Tsuyu said he was doing fine considering how much fighting he did. Momo looked at him and said, "He saved my life today." All Might stood a little straighter, pride filling his body. "I see that he's in good hands. I'll leave him to you," and All Might left. Recovery Girl walked up to All Might as he exited the nurse's office, asking how Izuku was doing. "He's asleep for now and being watched over by his classmates and Koda," All Might said. "I'll go check on him and see if he needs any healing," Recovery Girl said. Izuku was walking with his mom, looking up at her as she held his hand. He was little again. "I'm so proud of you," she told him as they were walking. "You're becoming a great man." "I miss you, Mom. I wish that you were here with me," Izuku said. "I'll always be here with you in your heart, but for now it's time for you to wake up," Inko said. "Wait, Mom, please don't go. Stay with me," Izuku pleaded. The girls heard Izuku call out to his mom as Recovery Girl entered the room. Momo, Achiko, Mina, and Tsu had tears welling up in their eyes. They didn't even notice as Recovery Girl entered the room. Recovery Girl saw the tears in the girls' eyes and hurried to the bed. "What's wrong?" she exclaimed. Their heads snapped as they heard the question. Tsuyu was the first to answer. He was calling out to his mom. Tsuyu answered. Izuku sat up, saying, "Wait, Mom." He opened his eyes to see Recovery Girl, Momo, Achiko, Mina, and Tsu. All Might practically exploded through the door. Izuku had tears streaming down his face. Recovery Girl asked the girls to leave. The girls left under extreme protest. All Might practically had to drag them out. Before he entered the room again, he told Koda, "Only teachers and the staff are allowed to enter for now." All Might was at Izuku's side in a heartbeat. "Are you okay, son?" Izuku looked at his father and said, "I had a dream I was walking with my mother, and she told me that she was proud of me." All Might hugged his son Izuku. "I'm proud of you too," he said. Recovery Girl looked at his splinted arm and asked, "Who took care of you, arm?" "It was Momo that took care of me," Izuku said. "Not bad," Recovery Girl said. "All Might, can you move so that I can treat Izuku, so we can get him out of this splint?" All Might released his son and stepped to the side to let Recovery Girl do her job. Recovery Girl leaned in and kissed Izuku's cheek. His arm, head, and ribs felt better. Izuku thanked her while she was removing his splint. Izuku asked what did he miss when he blacked out and how did they stop the fires. All Might smiled and said Koda used his quirk to stop the fires. Izuku smiled with that image playing out in his head. Professor Aizawa walked into the room and said, "I see the problem child has awakened." "Hey, I'm not a problem child," Izuku said. All Might began to chuckle, and Recovery Girl covered his mouth, but Izuku could still hear her giggle. "Rest tonight, and tomorrow you can resume your training," Recovery Girl said. As Izuku stepped out of the nurse's office, the next morning Class 1A ran up to Izuku, asking how is he doing. Before Izuku could answer, Toru walked up to him and asked, "Can I talk to you alone, please?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Okay," and followed her. The boys wanted to see what was going on, but the girls stopped them, saying that they needed to work something out. Toru turned to face Izuku and said, "I'm sorry." Izuku was surprised. Toru said, "I shouldn't have tried to steal a kiss, and I was shocked when I became visible. I can't remember the last time I saw myself, and you were the first person to see me naked." Izuku lowered his head and apologized again. "Izuku, it's not your fault, but if you really feel that bad about then, you can make it up to me," Toru said. "Anything," Izuku said. They rejoined the class. Toru said, "Izuku, if you would," and for the first time the whole class got to see Toru. "Damn it, nerd. What the hell is your quirk? I've seen you shoot spikes out the ground, form a boulder with those Noma things trapped inside." And now this Bakugo shouted. Izuku looked at Bakugo and said, "Why should I tell you all you have ever done is threaten and insult me? Even in middle school you insulted me for no reason. So my answer is no, I'm not going to tell you," Izuku said. Bakugo felt the stares from his classmates as he began looking around whatever he said and walked away. He knew this made him look like a bully and an idiot in front of the whole class. Damn, that nerd, Bakugo thought. "Okay, class, gather up," Professor Aizawa shouted. The class jogged over to him. "We have a couple of heroes volunteering to stay, so we could finish our training, so change into your gym clothes and get ready for combat, no quirks." Bakugo thanked to gods he finally got his wish. The randomizer pitted him against Izuku, as the rest of the class partnered up for the fights. Professor Aizawa said, "Today, you're going to fight for 5 minutes, or until one is knocked out or gives up. Everyone is going to watch, learn, and evaluate the matches. First up is Achiko versus Mineta. Next is Momo versus Shoto. Next, Izuku versus Bakugo," and continued until the whole class knew who they were fighting. Professor Aizawa stood in the center of the makeshift ring and smiled. "First two, take your places and begin," he shouted. Izuku wasn't surprised in the least bit when Professor Aizawa had to stop Achiko from killing Mineta after he grabbed her rear. She began pounding his face until he passed out, and even after he was out, she kept beating him. The next fight was close. Momo and Shoto both had solid hand-to-hand skills, but Shoto had more training than she did, and he won out in the end. "Hey nerd, be glad we aren't using our quirks, or this would be over very quickly," Bakugo said. Izuku smiled and said, "I remember our last fight you used your quirk and still got knocked out." Izuku hated being mean, but he was tired of Bakugo picking on him for no reason. "Begin," Aizawa said. Bakugo rushed in, counting on his speed and reflexes to beat Izuku quickly. He lead with a knee strike. Izuku sidestepped the attack. Bakugo followed up with a spinning backhand and a flurry of punches. Izuku flowed through his punches, moving just enough to avoid getting hit, barely blocking. Bakugo began to get angry, and he got sloppy, and that's when Izuku struck. Izuku stepped in when Bakugo threw a big right hook and caught Bakugo with an uppercut. Izuku grabbed Bakugo's head with both hands in a clinch and kneed him in the gut, then released the clinch and followed up with a series of elbow strikes to the torso and head. Bakugo's vision was blurry. He barely saw the punch that knocked him out. Izuku caught him before he fell and gently placed him down on the ground. Izuku stood up and backed off. Professor Aizawa began the 10 count before declaring the match over. Izuku walked closer to Bakugo and used his quirk to heal the slight concussion he gave him, then stepped out of the ring. Professor Aizawa walked up to Bakugo and tossed cold water on him. Bakugo sat up swinging. Bakugo realized what happened. He lost now. He had to fill the bucket to wake the next student that gets knocked out. The bucket got used 3 more times before all the fighting was done. The class discussed the matches, and Izuku was asked what were the moves he used on Bakugo. "I used boxing, Muay Thai, and Krav Maga," Izuku said. Some of the boys were asking for matches before Professor Aizawa got them back on track. After all the discussions were over, Professor Aizawa said, "Starting tomorrow, we're going to fight using your quirks." Izuku walked to the showers, wanting to clean up before dinner. When he heard a familiar voice call out to him, it was Lita asking him to hold up. "I wanted to ask you, how did you get so good at fighting? I was raised in a family of heroes, so I know how much dedication it takes to get that good," Lita said. Izuku smiled and simply said, "I've been training since I was young. Between your hand-to-hand skills and your quirk, I'm glad you choose the side of the heroes, or you would be one scary dude," Lita said. "I knew from a very young age that this was the path I want to take, so I began training from a very young age," Izuku said. "I commend you dedication," Lita said. "Can I ask you one more question?" Lita asked. "Sure," Izuku said. "Why do you avoid hanging out with us after class or training?" Lita asked. "I'm not strong enough to keep my friends safe yet, so I have to become stronger before I can comfortably do that," Izuku said, and turned to walk into the showers. Lita was unable to process that statement. Izuku was already scary strong. How much stronger does he need to become to have friends? Maybe I should talk to Achiko and see if she knows anything about this. Izuku sat down at one of the tables alone when Achiko sat down next to him and asked, "How are you doing?" Izuku looked up at her and said that he was fine and that he was impressed that she didn't kill Mineta after what he did. Achiko blushed, remembering what Mineta did. "Izuku, can I ask you a question?" "Okay," Izuku said. "Why do you think that you have to be stronger than what you are now to be able to have friends?" Achiko asked. Izuku looked around to see who was close enough to listen to what he was about to say. Apparently Mina, Toru, Momo, and Tu were making sure that they were left alone. Izuku lowered his head and said, "I'm afraid to lose the people close to me." I've already lost too much, and it would kill me if anything happened to the ones I care about, Izuku said. Before Achiko could say something, Izuku looked into her eyes. She could see the hurt and loss in them. Izuku said that this was the first time he has allowed people to get close to him, and it scares him. If something were to happen to you, or to Momo, Mina, and Pony, I don't know if I could ever forgive myself. A tear rolled down his face. Achiko didn't know what to say. Izuku got up and excused himself and vanished. The girls approached Achiko and asked what happened. We need to go to the cabin and talk, Achiko said. Izuku found All Might talking with Aizawa. They were alone. He reappeared and said, "Dad, can you please schedule an appointment with Baru for me?" All Might asked if everything was okay. Aizawa had a look of concern on his face. "I'm not sure, to be honest with you," Izuku said. All Might said, "You can talk to me about anything." Izuku told him how he felt. "I'll call Baru, but I think that she's going to agree with me when I say that it's okay for you to date and to have real friends. Come, son, let's spar. It will make you feel better," All Might said. Achiko explained to the girls of Class 1 at what Izuku said and was interrupted by Toru grumbling for not being mentioned by Izuku after seeing her naked. Mina quickly added the fact that he mentioned Pony. Kyoka looked at her classmates and asked, "What do you see in him? Do you really believe his dopey act?" "Don't get me wrong, he is a good-looking man, but I don't believe the act. He's just way too strong to be that kind and clueless," Kyoka said. Tsuyu was the first to answer. "Did you know that after he saved me, he could have just vanished, but he stayed just to comfort my little sister?" Kyoka said, "I didn't know that. My mother ran into him before I got to see him again, and do you know what he told her?" He said. "I don't know," Kyoka said. "After he turned himself into the police, he told my mom to tell me and my sister that he was sorry that he didn't get there sooner to help," Sue said. Achiko spoke next. "When he saved me, he placed himself right in front of me and shielded me from the Zero robot. Then he defeated it, then carried me to the nurse's office before he left." Momo spoke next. "When he rescued me from the Nomu, after making sure I was okay, he acted as bait to keep the Nomu from attacking me again." Toru spoke next. "You were sitting with us when he helped Koda." "Who's Koda?" Kyoka asked. The little boy Toru said he was mean to Izuku, but despite that, Izuku still helped him. "Trust us, it's not an act. That's just who he is, a kind, shy, dopey guy," too said. All of the girls jumped when they heard the thunderclap that rattled their cabin. All Might was a blur of motion. He was smiling as he moved in to strike Izuku. That last bolt of lighting that Izuku threw was close. Izuku braced for the strike. When All Might hit his barrier, it forced him down 3 full inches into the ground. Izuku smiled as he released his barrier and launched himself at his father. Aizawa was standing watching the fight when students and the staff came running out to see if they were under attack again. "It's okay," Aizawa said. "They're just sparing. There's no need to worry." Izuku landed a glancing blow enhanced with kinetic energy, which knocked All Might back 3 full feet. "You're getting better, Izuku. Get ready, because here I come." All Might took a deep breath and threw a punch in the air that had so much power behind it that even with his barrier in place, Izuku flew back 30 feet into the wood line, taking down some trees with him. Aizawa looked at All Might and said, "The two of you might want to dial it down a little." For trees came arching out of the wood line, flying towards All Might. Izuku exploded out of the wood line in a direct shot towards his father. All Might leaped and knocked away the trees while Izuku leaped to hit his father. All Might kicked Izuku with enough force to leave a crater in the ground. When he landed, he walked over to his son and extended his arm. Izuku reached out and took his hand. "I thought I had you that time," Izuku said as they both stepped up and out of the crater. Both Class 1A and 1B were standing there in shock with the display they just saw. Momo saw the look in Izuku's eyes. This was the happiest she has ever seen him. She wasn't the only one. Achiko, Tsuyu, and Mina noticed as well. Pony was outside enjoying the night air when she saw Izuku and All Might walk towards the edge of camp and begin to stretching. She barely heard Professor Aizawa say begin, and the bolt of lighting Izuku through scared her. She ran and stood with Professor Aizawa staring in awe at both men fighting. The other students came running out, but she barely noticed them. Izuku was amazing, and he looked happy. This was the first time she saw a real smile on his face. She fell a little more in love with him at that moment. Monoma walked up to her and said, "There he goes again, showing off." Pony said, "I dare you to tell him that." Monoma said, "No, I think I'm good," when he saw Izuku walking out of the crater. Pony saw Izuku heading to the hot spring after he and All Might were done. Izuku sat in the hot springs and relaxed. The sparring did make him feel better. It cleared out the worry and doubts. Kota joined Izuku and said that I've never seen a fight like that before, and I was afraid that you were going to get hurt. Izuku smiled and said, "I've been training to fight since I was your age. I'm good, but compared with All Might, I'm just a rookie." Both boys froze when they heard a girl's voice saying, "I wouldn't call you a rookie," Kendo said, as she and all of the girls of Class 1B entered the girls' side of the hot spring, barely covering themselves with their towels. Kota turned bright red and passed out. Izuku caught him with his quirk. When Izuku saw Pony enter looking shy and blushing, his nose began to bleed, and he blushed all the way down to his neck. Izuku tried to speak, but nothing coherent came out. "Are you okay?" Izuku Pony asked shyly. Izuku turned a deeper red. As Pony saw Izuku heading towards the hot spring, Kendo walked over to her and asked, "What are you staring at?" Kendo looked and saw Izuku headed towards the hot spring, and a viscous grin spread across her face. "Kodai, can you come over here? Hurry, please," Kendo said. "I need you to run to the hot spring and flip the curtain sign," Kendo said. Before Kodai asked why she saw Izuku heading in that direction, and she smiled. Kendo said, "As soon as he enters, flip the curtain back, and don't worry, I'll bring your towel and your shower bag." Kodai took off, and the rest of the girls of Class 1B headed towards their cabin. Pony looked at Kendo and asked if this was a good idea. "We'll finally have him all to ourselves," Kendo said. Kodai was about to flip the curtain back when Kota showed up. She waited for him to join Izuku, then flipped the curtains. "I didn't know that you were so bold to enter into the girls' side of the hot spring," Komori said. "I think that he needs to be punished," Shiozaki said. "I'm sorry, I thought I entered the boys' side," Izuku said. He desperately wanted to use his quirk to lift him and Kota over the wall, but doing that could ruin the hot spring. The girls started to enter the water, and Pony walked up to and sat down right next to him. Izuku was trying his hardest to stay calm, but failing miserably. "You act like you never seen a girl naked," Yanagi said. "I've only seen one girl naked, and it was by accident," Izuku said. Pony nuzzled into Izuku's shoulder, hearing that only solidified how she felt. "Is it true that you never had a girlfriend?" Tokage asked. Izuku swallowed before he answered, "No, I've never had a girlfriend." "Have you ever kissed a girl?" Pony asked. "No, I've never kissed a girl," Izuku said. Try to keep his towel in place and hide his body's reaction of being surrounded by very pretty more than half-naked girls. Everyone went silent when they heard the voices of Mandalay, Pishi Bob, and Ragdoll. Izuku vanished and used his quirk to lift Kota out of the water and placed him against the wall. Pony still felt Izuku next to her when the three women walked in completely naked. "Oh, I didn't expect anyone to be in here so late," Mandalay said. "I can't blame them after a fight like that," Ragdoll said. "What happened to Kota?" Pishi Bob exclaimed. "He was in the water when we walked in, and it was a little too much for him, and he passed out, so we placed him against the wall," Komori said. "I wonder why he would be on the girls' side," Mandalay said. The girls all began to move to make room for the three women. Pony shifted onto Izuku's lap. Kendo sat where Pony was sitting, and Shiozaki sat on the other side of Pony. Izuku lost what little control he had. He had a raging bone, and Pony felt all of it. Pony began to blush when she felt how hard Izuku was. She spread her legs, slightly giving it room to go in front of her. "Yeah, after the fight, we all were a little restless and decided to come here and talk about it to relax," Yanagi said. "I didn't expect that there would be a student could fight like that," Pishi Bob said. "What kind of person is he?" Ragdoll asked. "He's kind, shy, gentle, humble," Pony said, softly feeling how hard he was in between her legs. "He also gets embarrassed easily," Kendo added. "Really, I'm kind of surprised by that," Mandalay said. "Guys like that are normally arrogant, cocky, or just like to show off how strong they are," she said. "He's in Class 1. Hey, so we don't get to spend much time with him, but all of the girls in his class say he is a gentle soul," Kendo said. Izuku didn't know how to feel hearing all of these girls talking about him. The one thing he knew was that if Pony squirming he was going to lose his mind. Thankfully, after about 20 minutes, Mandalay said, "Okay, girls, tomorrow is going to be an early morning. Let's call a night." Mandalay was the last of the girls to leave as she picked Kota up and took her with him. Izuku was taking deep breaths, trying his hardest to calm down. He stayed invisible as he exited the hot springs, mostly to hide his hard-on, partly to hide the fact that he was there. Just before he got to the cabin, he released his quirk and tried hard to forget everything he saw as he tried to go to sleep. The girls of Class 1B were all talking about the close call they just had. Pony was laying in her bed, thinking about how hard and large Izuku was, and how he was pressing up and throbbing against her love hole, and up her thighs she didn't hear Kendo calling her name. Kendo tapped Pony, and she practically jumped out of bed. The rest of the girls laughed at Pony's reaction. I bet she was thinking about when she was sitting on Izuku's lap, Kendo said. Pony blushed, and the girls began to giggle. How is he? I bet you felt everything, Kendo said. Pony turned crimson. He's huge. I felt everything. I couldn't stop squirming because he was throbbing against me. Shiozaki and Kodai eyes both rolled up, and they both passed out. I need to apologize to him, Pony said. I don't think you should. I bet he's going to be dreaming about you tonight, Yanagi said. We should get some rest tomorrow. It's going to be a hard day, Kendo said. Turns out Pony also had some very vivid dreams. Izuku looked haggard when he woke up. He had a hard time going to sleep, and when he finally fell asleep, all he could dream about was Pony sitting on his lap, grinding down on him. I need to work out. He got dressed, left the cabin, and began going over various martial arts forms, fluid transitions between strikes and blocks. Achiko was the first of the girls to wake. She got dressed, and when she stepped out, Izuku was already training. She stared at him, going through his motions. He was surprisingly graceful. The rest of the girls came out shortly after she did, and all of the instructors were all starting to gather. Both classes joined the instructors. Today you're going to fight using your quirks. The rules are simple: knock out your opponent, or make them submit, or incapacitate them, Professor Aizawa said. Any use of lethal force will be dealt with quickly, and you will be expelled. All Might followed up with. We will be using the randomizer today. Listen up for your names, Ragdoll said. Mineta versus Shisuda, Tokoyami versus Komori, Tokage versus Izuku. Once all the students were called, the first two got into the ring. Mineta was upset that he got pitted against another guy. Look, little guy, just give up, and I won't have to hurt you. Mineta looked at the big guy and thought if I could beat him, maybe the girls would be impressed with me. To everyone's surprise, Mineta actually won. It was more by accident, but a win is a win. When he walked out of the ring, he began blowing kisses to the girls. Izuku had to use his quirk to unstick all of the balls on Shisuda, so he could move without ripping more of his hair out. Tokoyami and Dark Shadow was doing well in his fight against Komori until mushrooms started to sprout out from all over his skin thanks to Komori's quirk. Izuku stepped into the ring, and Tokage called out to him, "Hey, Stud, you ready for this?" Stud, Izuku asked. "I guess I could call you Horse," Tokage said. "Begin," Aizawa said. Izuku was still confused. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. The girls of 1A got the meaning, and you could feel the murderous intent coming from them. "We were told you were hung like a horse," Tokage said, and she sprung into action. Izuku turned a very deep red, and then the strikes began. Tokage split into small pieces, and all of them rushed Izuku, at once hitting him in the face, chest, and legs all at once before forming back up. Izuku shook off the blows and faced his opponent again. That was an awesome attack. Tokage said, "Don't worry, Stud, I've got more than that up my sleeve." Izuku smiled and said, "Bring it." Tokage split again, but this time Izuku vanished. She tried an area attack with her body parts, and then let out a soft voice and began pulling her body back together. Izuku reappeared holding a part of her. "Could you please let go of my rack?" Tokage said. Izuku turned crimson and let go of her like it was on fire. Professor Aizawa just placed his face in his hand. Mineta began crying, yelling, "It's not fair that Izuku got to play with her melons." "I'm so sorry," Izuku said. "This is a fight. It happens," Tokage said. "I'm going to end this fight right now." "Good night," Izuku said, and used his quirk to put her to sleep. Tokage's eyes began to flutter, and she fell asleep. She fell forward, and he caught her and carried her over to her class side of the field before joining his class and getting mobbed by the girls of 1A. When all of the fighting was over, Professor Aizawa reminded them to pack up their stuff, that they were leaving first thing in the morning. During lunch, Izuku told the girls what happened. The only reason there wasn't a brawl was because he made them promise that they wouldn't do anything. The girls of 1 took turns escorting Izuku everywhere, and when he went for his shower, the girls went for theirs. The girls of 1A were in the hot spring when the girls of 1B joined them. Kendo was the first to speak. Izuku didn't know he was on a girl's side. We wanted to give Pony a chance to be close to Izuku without all of you hounding her, Kendo said. Plus, last time we checked, Izuku doesn't belong to any of you, Tokage said. You're right, he doesn't belong to any of us, Tsi said. But at the same time, he's a really nice guy, and what your guys did was wrong, she continued. Achiko looked at Pony and asked, why did you sit on his lap? Pony blushed, remembering how he fell in between her legs. I didn't want one cat dolls to accidentally sit on him, Pony said. Can we call a truce for now, Momo said. All of the girls agreed. The next question Momo asked surprised everyone. Is he really that big? Pony turned a deep red and softly said yes. All of the girls began to giggle. When Izuku heard all of the girls giggling, he was finally able to relax. When Izuku saw Koda when he was heading towards the bus, Koda ran and hugged Izuku. Can you come back and visit when you get a chance, Koda asked. No problem, Izuku said. Here is my number if you want to talk. He hugged Koda one last time and got on the bus. When the buses pulled up to UA University, the students noticed the Maybach that was parked just ahead of the buses. Momo was the first student to exit the bus, excited to see her parents. When Izuku finally exited the bus, Momo called him over to meet her parents. When Izuku walked up to them, her father stepped up to him and shook his hand, thanking him for saving his only child. Her mother stepped up to him and hugged him and said, you must join us for dinner. Izuku bashfully said that they didn't have to go out of their way to thank him, saying that anyone would have done that. Her father took a step back, reassessing the young man. I'm going to have to disagree with you. Not many people will put themselves in harm's way to save another, her father said. Her mother looked at Izuku and said, next Saturday you will join us for dinner. Momo has spoken very highly of you, and now I can see why. Izuku blushed and humbly accepted. I'll let you spend some time with your daughter now, and excused himself. Momo's mother looked at him as he walked away. For someone you claim is so strong, he is so very humble that it's cute. Are you sure he's the one you want to give your heart to, her father asked. This surprised Momo, father, she exclaimed, blushing. You wouldn't call us to introduce us to someone unless you had strong feeling towards him and wanted to know if we approved, her mother said. Before I give you my blessing, I want to see how he is when he comes over for dinner, her mother said. Momo blushed and simply said that he has never had a girlfriend or even kissed a girl, in case you're wondering. Both of her parents looked at her in surprise, and her mother said, are you sure? Yes, ma'am, trust me, multiple girls here have tried, and all have failed. It was nice to be back home, Izuku thought. I could finally get time to myself. By the end of their training camp, Izuku was stressed, not by the training, but by how the girls were treating him. All Might told Izuku about the maid cafe that opened, and Izuku thought that he would give a try. After his workout and shower, he headed out. Izuku was right by the cafe when a little girl dressed in rags and bandaged up ran out of the alley by the cafe and ran right into him. Izuku leaned down to pick up the little girl and saw the fear in her eyes. He froze. Are you okay? He asked. The little girl shook her head no when a voice from the alley called out to her. Eri, come back here, or I will have to punish you for running away again. Eri scrambled to hide behind Izuku's leg. Izuku leaned down and picked up the little girl. He could feel the trembling of fear, so he hugged her a little tighter. Who are you? Izuku asked. I'm her father, the man in the plague mask replied, and I would appreciate if you would give me my daughter back. Eri began to shake harder. Izuku cupped her head and placed it against his shoulder. How about I call the police and we settle this, but I'm not going to let you have this little girl. She is terrified of you, Izuku said. I will only ask you one more time, give me back the child, or you will regret it, the man in the plague mask said. Izuku felt the man's murderous intent when another man stepped out of the shadow, wearing a plague mask, and whispered into the first man's ear. The first man said, you will regret crossing me. Just because you stopped a weak criminal doesn't mean you have power. I will see you again, and soon. Both men melted back into the background and disappeared. Izuku hugged the little girl tight, just like All Might did for him, and she began to weep. The girls of Class 1A and 1B decided to go shopping together to try to get to know each other better after what they called the Izuku incident. Achiko saw him first and asked, is that Izuku? All of the girls began to look when they saw the little girl in rags run out of the alley. They marveled in how he picked up the terrified little girl. Before they could move, they saw the man step out of the alleyway, and they could feel the murderous intent from across the street. Izuku never wavered, even when the second man stepped out of the shadows. When both of the men left, Izuku was standing there hugging the crying little girl. Momo was running across the street, followed by the rest of the girls of both classes. Tsuyu was on the phone, calling local law enforcement while she was running. Izuku had his eyes closed as he hugged the little girl, gently stroking her hair, speaking softly, telling her it's going to be all right. When he felt a lot of people enter his area of influence, he opened his eyes ready to fight if necessary. When he saw who it was, he relaxed, but the girl he was holding began breath heavy, and she started to shake again. He asked the girls to stop and explained that the little girl was scared. Izuku turned his attention back to the little girl, speaking in a soothing voice, calming her down. All of the girls looked at how Izuku was taking care of this little girl, and if any of them had any doubts about how kind he was, they melted away. "Why did you stop me from taking Eri back from that young punk?" Chisaki asked. "I saw the footage of how he saved those girls," Chrono said. "You would have been captured in a head-to-head fight," Chrono said. "It's my job to advise you, and until you relieve me from that duty," he continued. "Tell me everything you know about that punk," Chisaki said. "All I know is that he saved 2 girls several months ago by capturing Slime Villain. I watched all of the footage I could find. He managed to completely lock it in place, and then shoved it into a 2-liter soda bottle," Chrono said. "So had I charged him, he could have locked me in place until cops arrived," Chisaki said. "I need you to look into this guy for me. I want to know everything: family, friends, anyone that he remotely cares about. I will get Eri back," Chisaki said. "Consider it done," Chrono said. As the police showed up, Izuku was still holding the little girl who finally fell asleep in his arms. The sirens woke her up in a panic. Her eyes opened before she could push away. Izuku began talking in a soothing voice, gently stroking her hair. Eri began to calm down. She held on to Izuku as if her life depended on it. Momo was standing in front of Izuku when he asked her to reach into his front pocket and hit the number 2 on his speed dial and say, "I need you here." Momo reached into Izuku's pocket and pulled out his phone and did what she was asked to do. All Might's phone began to vibrate, and before he could speak, a girl's voice said, "I need you here." All Might hung up his phone and turned on Izuku's GPS, spun, and leaped. As an older police officer arrived, the girls began to explain what happened. When she tried to take Eri from Izuku, everyone looked in surprise. As she quickly began to get younger, Izuku used his quirk and canceled everyone's quirk around him. He saw the look of fear in Eri's eyes and told her, "It's going to be okay. I'm going to protect you." All Might landed just in time to hear Izuku's declaration and walked up to Izuku. The wave of nostalgia hit All Might hard, looking at Izuku, holding the little girl the same way he held Izuku. Izuku looked up to see his father walk up with a tear in his eye. All of the girls looked in surprise as All Might strode up to Izuku. Eri saw All Might and was in awe of how he was looking at her. He had a tear in his eye. Izuku told his father everything and told him how Eri made the police officer about 15 years younger in about 20 seconds. "Since Eraser Head isn't here, she's going to have to stay with you as we get her checked," All Might said. "I'll call Recovery Girl and make the arrangements. I don't think that she's going to let go of you anytime soon." As he looked at Eri, All Might said. Izuku looked at his father and said, "I'll head to UA and meet you in her office." All Might looked at all of the girls, then to his son, and asked, "Are you on a date with all of them?" Izuku turned a deep red as All Might leaped towards UA. Izuku looked at the girls and apologized for ruining their day by involving them in his issues. "I will go with you to UA, so you don't have to be alone," Tsu said. "Thank you," Izuku said, and before anyone else could volunteer, Izuku used his quirk and lifted the ground they were standing on and shot off to UA. The rest of the girls looked at each other, stunned that Izuku took off before they could ask to go. Achiko huffed, saying it wasn't fair that Tsu got to go and they didn't. Momo just realized that she still had Izuku's phone. The girls decided their day of shopping was done and that they would get together on Monday. Momo called her parents and asked them to pick her up so that they could eat dinner and tell them about today's events. Izuku and Tsu landed at UA and began walking towards Recovery Girl's office. Eri had fallen asleep again. "I'm surprised she fell asleep when you lifted us with your quirk," Tsu said. "I put her to sleep so that she wouldn't be scared," Izuku said, "but now it's time to wake her up." Eri felt the calming strokes on her head, waking up in the arms of the man that saved her. She reached up to touch his face to see if this was just some wonderful dream or was she really safe. Izuku felt her touching his face and looked down and smiled at her. "How are you feeling?" he asked her. "I'm hungry," Eri said. "I'll get you some food after we get you checked by our doctor," Izuku said. Eri began to shake. She remembered all of the experiments they have done to her. So you looked at Eri and said it's going to be okay. Eri pressed her face against Izuku when she realized that they weren't alone. Izuku canceled her quirk just to be safe. "Don't worry, I'll be there with you for everything, and nobody here is going to hurt you," Izuku said. "Do you promise that you'll stay?" Eri asked. "I promise," Izuku said. As Izuku, Eri and two entered Recovery Girl's office, All Might was waiting with Recovery Girl. Eri was nervous as Recovery Girl walked up to her and slowly began checking her. All Might was taken aback with how Izuku was treating this little girl. Izuku was always kind, but he was more warrior than anything else. But here he was calming a child, looking at her with more compassion than he has ever seen on his son's face. All Might couldn't have been more proud of his son. Tsuyu's heart melted. She already liked Izuku, but after seeing this side of him, she fell completely in love with him. After the exam was finished, she said, "I'll see you Monday. I have to go for now." Izuku said, "Could you please wait for me outside for a moment? I'll take you home." Her heart began to race as she agreed to wait for him and stepped out of the office. Izuku put Eri back to sleep with his quirk and said, "Dad, I want to take care of this little girl. Please let me care for her." "Son, this isn't going to be easy. You're in training to be a hero, and raising a child takes a lot of time," All Might said. "I reached out to Aizawa, and he agreed to watch over her because of how dangerous her quirk is," he continued. "Dad, you saved me the same way, and you and the teachers raised me. Please let me pay it forward. Let me save Eri the way you saved me. She trusts me. If you could have seen the way she looked at me when I woke her up," Izuku said. All Might looked deep into his son's eyes, took a deep breath, and agreed. You saw Izuku stepping out of Recovery Girl's office. Eri was asleep again. As they walked out of the school, Tsu asked what is going to happen to the girl. Izuku smiled down at Eri and said, "I'm going to take care of her," as he used his quirk to lift both of them on a small patch of ground and flew to her house. Recovery Girl looked at All Might and asked, "Are you sure that was the right thing to do?" "I don't know," All Might said. "I think it will be good for him. I have never seen so much compassion in his eyes," Recovery Girl said. "To be honest, the only other time he really seems happy is when the two of you spar," Recovery Girl said. "I did my best to raise him," All Might said. "We did our best," Recovery Girl said. So you invited Izuku inside, but politely said not this time, but promised that he would stop by soon, then lifting back up into the air and vanishing. Baru was sitting in the living room when Tsuyu entered and asked how was her day with her friends. Tsuyu looked at her mother and sat with her and told her everything, to include how she felt when she saw so much compassion in his eyes. "Mom, I told you that I had feelings for him before, but I think that I'm in love with him." Ganma just happened to walk into the room when Tsuyu said that. "Who are you in love with? Is it Izuku?" Ganma asked. Baru looked at her husband and said, "This is a mother-daughter conversation. Why don't you please empty out the trash and allow us to finish our talk, please?" Ganma grumbled, but did as his wife asked. Momo and her parents were in a restaurant when she told them about her day. How she was buying a new dress for their dinner with Izuku when they saw him. She told them how he picked up that little girl and defended her from those men, how she felt their malice from across the street. Then how he looked when he was comforting the little girl. Momo was practically glowing. She could still see him stroking that little girl's hair, comforting her as he held him for dear life. "He sounds like a brave, compassionate young man," her father said. "I'll be honest with you, I thought he saved you from that Nomu, because he knew your net worth," her father continued. "Honey, are you sure that you want to give this young man your heart?" her mother asked. "I think it's too late," Mother Momo said. "When I look in his eyes, I feel like I'm drowning in them. He is kind, compassionate, honest, and I felt safe when he saved me from that," Noma Momo said. "You really felt safe while he was fighting that monster?" her mother asked. "I saw the look of determination in his eyes and knew nothing was going to get to me," Momo said. "Baby, you have our blessing to pursue him," her father said. Eri's eyes fluttered open when she smelled the food cooking. She didn't know where she was, but the sofa she was on was very comfortable. She carefully began looking around room, and then began to follow the smell of food. As she entered the kitchen, she saw the man that saved her cooking. "Hello," Eri said softly. Izuku turned slowly and smiled. "You said you were hungry, so I made you an egg drop soup with some rice and fish." Eri's stomach let out a rumble, and she blushed. "My name is Izuku, and I want to welcome you to your new home." Eri looked down at her feet and asked, "Really? Really, I promise that you're safe here. I live here with my father, and you'll meeting him soon," Izuku said. "Tomorrow I'm going to buy you some new clothing and other things that you're going to need," he continued. "But for now, please sit down at the table, and let's eat," Izuku said. As Eri looked at Izuku for the first time in her life, she felt safe. He made the bad men go away, and he just told her that this was her new home. Achiko called her parents to tell them about her day, but to her surprise, when her mom picked, she said, "I was just about to call you." "Really?" Achiko said. "Yes, your dad's company won a bid that makes us financially secure," her mom said. Achiko was so happy for her parents. They have worked so hard, barely getting by. Now they secure. "What did you want to tell me, honey?" her mom asked. "Mom, do you remember the young man that saved me? He saved this little girl today, Mom. If you could have seen him," Achiko said. "Mom, is it all right if I ask him out on a date?" she continued. "Oh, honey, you've been such a wonderful girl." "Yes, honey, you can ask him out," her mom said. Eri was stuffed. She enjoyed the meal Izuku made for them. Izuku picked up the empty plates and washed them. "Okay, Eri, it's time for you to shower. I'm going to give you one of my shirts to sleep in," Izuku said. Izuku led Eri to the bathroom, gave her a towel and one of his t-shirts. "Do you need me to help you take off the bandages and replace them with new ones?" Izuku asked. Eri only nodded her head. Izuku has kneeled down and began unraveling her bandages. He felt his anger rising. "Eri, what happened to your arms and legs?" Izuku asked. Eri began trying to hide her scars. Izuku gently cupped her face with his hand, causing her to stop squirming. "Don't worry, you don't ever have to hide anything from me. I will protect you, and never let anyone do this to you again," Izuku said. Izuku used his quirk and began removing scars. Eri's eyes grew wide as her scars started to disappear. When All Might got home, Izuku was sitting in the living room. He could see the hurt and anger on his son's face. All Might walked up to his son and kneeled in front of him and asked him what's wrong. "Dad, I'm so angry right now. I'm afraid that if I find the guy that did this to her, I'm not going to be able to stop myself from hurting him," Izuku said. "What happened?" All Might asked. Izuku told him about all of Eri's scars and how Eri got them. All Might placed his hand on Izuku's shoulder and explained to him why he was feeling the way he was. "Your appointment with Baru is on Tuesday after school. What would you like to do about Eri during your appointment?" All Might asked. "I'll take her with me. I'll just put her to sleep during the meeting so that she doesn't have to separate it from me for now until I can get her to trust the people that are going to watch over her." Eri stepped into the living room to see All Might kneeling in front of Izuku, talking to him the way Izuku spoke to her. When All Might saw Eri, he stood up. "You must be Eri. I'm Izuku's father," he said. When Eri saw All Might stand, she was in awe of how large he was and how kind he looked in person. Izuku stood up and walked over to Eri and picked her up and asked her if she washed her hair, and she said no because she doesn't like getting shampoo in her eyes. Izuku said, "Okay, let go, I'll wash your hair." Eri stepped back into the tub and filled it and sat down, then called Izuku. Izuku walked in with the little bucket All Might used to wash his hair when he was young. Izuku asked Eri to close her eyes and filled the little bucket and began washing her hair. Eri couldn't remember anyone being so gentle with her. When he was done, her hair went from a dingy gray to snow white. Izuku stepped out of the bathroom so Eri could get out and dry herself off in private. Then he took her to his room and tucked her in. "You're not going to leave me?" Eri asked. "I'll be in the living room if you need me," Izuku said and kissed her on the forehead. He saw plenty of mothers do that to make their children feel better when he would go to the park when he was young. Izuku was asleep on the sofa when he felt tugging on his blanket. He woke up to Eri standing next to him, saying she had a bad dream. He pulled his blanket off, picked her up, and placed her on his chest, and covered them both. Izuku began gently stroking Eri's hair, and she fell back asleep. When All Might walked into the living room the following morning and saw Izuku asleep with Eri on his chest, he smiled, grabbed his cell phone, and took pictures. Izuku woke up when he smelled breakfast being made. When he looked down, Eri was drooling on his chest. This made him smile. She was so cute. He began to gently pat her head, and she began to wake up. Eri lifted her head and wiped the drool off her chin and said, "Good morning." Come, let's brush our teeth and then eat breakfast. All Might smiled when they entered the kitchen and asked Izuku if he got the pictures he sent him. Izuku tapped his pockets and remembered that he forgot to get his phone back from Momo. I don't have my phone, I'll call it after breakfast, Izuku said. Momo saw 2 messages pop up on Izuku's phone and couldn't help herself and opened them. Her heart melted. Izuku was sleeping with Eri on his chest. The second picture was a close-up of Eri drooling on his chest. Momo giggled at that one. She quickly forwarded them to her phone. She knew the other girls would love to see this. Izuku's phone started ringing. Momo checked the caller ID, and when it said Dad, she answered. Hi Momo, would you mind meeting me at Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall by the entrance? Izuku asked. Sure, Momo said, trying to keep her voice calm. Does 10 work for you? Izuku asked. Momo looked at the time and said sure. Okay, I'll see you soon, Izuku said and hung up. Dad, can I borrow the car? And do you still have my old car seat? Izuku asked. It's in the attic. I never could get rid of it, All Might said. Okay, Eri, let's brush your hair. We're going to buy you what you need today, Izuku said. All Might handed Izuku an all-black credit card and said, don't worry about prices. Make sure she enjoys herself. Izuku hugged his father and said thank you. Momo walked quickly into the study and saw that both of her parents were there. Mother, I could use some help if you don't mind. Sure, darling. As she rose, what do you need? Her mom asked. Izuku just called and asked if I could meet him at the mall at 10, and I could use help with my makeup and hair, Momo said. Don't worry, darling. When I'm done with you, he won't be able to take his eyes off your, mom said. Please show a little restraint. I want to know more about him before he pounds on our doors begging to marry our daughter, her father said with a smile. Momo blushed as her mother held her hand, leading her back to her room. The large SUV dropped Momo off by the entrance when she saw Izuku walking up with the little girl he saved yesterday. Izuku was carrying the little girl, who seemed to be wearing one of his shirts. Momo began to imagine Izuku with one of their children. The thought made her blush when Izuku noticed her. Hi Momo, you look really nice, Izuku said. Let me introduce you to Eri, he continued. Hi, Eri, Momo said. Eri buried her face in Izuku's neck, and in a very low voice, she said hi. I'm going to take care of Eri. She doesn't have any clothing or any shoes, so I wanted to know if you could help me pick out nice clothing for her, Izuku asked. I'd love to, Momo said as she smiled at Eri. Eri began looking at Momo and said, you're really pretty. Momo's smile deepened as she thanked Eri. Here's your phone before I forget, Momo said. They entered the mall and began their day of shopping. Momo's heart began fluttering as some of the store attendants called her Izuku's wife. Izuku didn't correct anyone. He thought Momo would let them know she wasn't his wife. Momo blushed when another attendant said, I think these shoes would look great on your daughter. Eri tried on a bunch of different cloths, and when Izuku asked her, which was she like, Eri said, I like them all. Izuku said, I'll take all of it. Momo noticed the credit card he used. It was the same type she had. She knew that card had no limit, yet Izuku never dressed, nor did her ever show off that he was rich. This fact alone warmed her heart. Momo reached out for Eri's hand, and to her surprise, she took it, allowing Izuku to carry all of the shopping bags. Eri, now dressed in a dress and a cute set of boots, she looked completely different. She was wearing the same colors Momo was. Momo asked where to next. Furniture store. She needs a bed and a dresser, Izuku said. I know the perfect one, Momo said. Follow me. After Eri picked out the bed she wanted and Momo selected the dresser, Izuku made all of the delivery arrangements. Momo, would you care to join us for dinner? Izuku asked. Momo said, I know a nice place not far from here. Okay, Izuku said, let's go put this in the car and get some food. After the meal, Izuku thanked Momo for everything as he was driving her home. Eri was fast asleep in the back seat. Momo looked at Izuku and asked the question that had been on her mind all day. Why didn't you correct anyone when they called me your wife or when they thought Eri was my daughter? Izuku smiled. It was a sad smile. Before she could stop him, he answered, I know you. Achiko and Mina followed me when I went to the cemetery, he said. I've learned to pay close attention to my surroundings by necessity, Izuku said. I lost my mother when I was about Eri's age. Eri didn't have any family that she could remember, and just for today, we were able to give her that. Since he didn't correct anyone, I let it go. To be honest, it was nice, and I really enjoyed it, Izuku said. Well, he pulled up to the front of her mansion and placed the car in park. I want to thank you, Momo. You really made this day special, not just for Eri, for me too, Izuku said. Momo's eyes began to tear up, and she hugged Izuku. You're welcome, she said. Izuku hugged her back. He released her and looked at her. He took in how beautiful she really was. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll have Eri with me. Could you meet us by the gate? She's still very shy, and I'm sure she would like to see you again, Izuku said. Momo looked in the back seat. Eri was still asleep and said, I'll see you at the gate, as she stepped out of the car. Momo watched as they drove off. She thought about what he said, then let it go. For today, she got to be his wife and mother of his child, and that alone made today perfect, and she couldn't wait to tell her mother. Izuku pulled into the garage and popped open the trunk. He got out, then reached in the back seat and picked Eri up. He used his quirk to lift up all of the bags from his shopping trip and entered his house. All Might smiled when he walked into the living room and asked, did Eri have fun? Izuku smiled. She did. I don't think she has ever walked far. She got tired pretty quickly, and after we ate, she fell asleep when we took Momo home. All Might smiled and asked him if he asked her out on a date. Izuku smiled and said, no, I asked her to meet me there so I could get my phone back. Then she went shopping with us, and we went dinner when we finished. All Might smiled. Did you enjoy yourself? Izuku smiled and said, I really did, and I'm grateful that you let me use the car. Oh, before I forget, here's your credit card, Izuku said. That's your card. I was going to give you that sooner, but I forgot, and you never really asked for anything, All Might said. But for now, put Eri to bed and get ready for school tomorrow, All Might said. Momo walked into the backyard and saw her mother reading a book. How did your day go? Her mother asked. Momo smiled and told her how people called her his wife and the mother of his child, and he didn't correct them. He has a child. I thought you said that he's never been with anyone, her mother asked. He hasn't, but he's taking care of the little girl. He saved, Momo said. She has a quirk that made a woman about 20 years younger in about 15 seconds, and he's one of very few list of people that can stop her with his quirk, Momo said. Is there anything this young man can't do, her mother asked. He just sounds too good to be true. Besides, can he afford to care for this child, her mother asked. He used the same card we used, the one with no limit, Momo said. He's kind, humble, gentle, and can fight. His family is wealthy, and he has a powerful quirk, and isn't a womanizer. Maybe he's lacking in the downstairs department, her mother said. Momo blushed and told her about the hot springs incident, and how the girl said he was very large. Oh, my, her mother said. He told me that I made this day special not only for that little girl, but for him also, Momo said. You found a very rare breed. Hold on to him, and I'll talk with your father about him, her mother said. We're going to make dinner very special for him on Saturday, her mother continued. Would you like to see a picture of him with Eri? She's the little girl he saved, as Momo pulled out her cell phone. Her mother's heart melted as she saw the two of them asleep on the couch. Izuku was getting Eri ready to join him for school today. She was nervous about being around people. Izuku promised that he would protect her, and she was going to see Momo again. Izuku made them breakfast and packed a lunch for both of them. Eri squealed when he lifted them both up with his quirk and shot towards UA. Momo watched as Izuku and Eri walked up to the gate. Momo smiled and told Eri good morning. Eri smiled and said morning. Izuku said, thank you for meeting us here. Momo blushed. It's not a problem. She reached out with her hand, and Eri took it, and the three of them headed to class. Tio and Achiko were walking to class together when they saw Momo, Eri, and Izuku walking holding hands. Their hearts dropped. Achiko called out to Izuku, and when he saw her, he waved them over. Eri hid partially behind Izuku's leg when they walked over. Izuku introduced them to Eri. So you asked Eri if she remembered her. Eri thought and said, you were there when I had to see the doctor. Tsuyu smiled and said yes. Izuku picked Eri up and said, you don't have to worry, they are nice, so you have nothing to worry about. Eri looked at Izuku and said, you promise? I promise, Izuku said. Achiko smiled and asked Eri, have you ever floated before? Eri said no. Would you like to? Achiko asked. Eri looked at Izuku and he smiled at her and said, it's okay if you want to. Eri nodded her head, and Achiko touched her and used her quirk. Izuku let go, and Eri floated in place, and Eri squealed in delight. Achiko took Eri's hand and asked, where are we going? Izuku said, we're going to class. Eri held on to Achiko's hand, and she reached for Izuku's hand, and he took it, and they walked to class. Bakugo was pissed off when Izuku walked into the class holding a floating girl's hand. and Achiko holding the girl's other hand, followed by the rich girl and the frog girl. It made the news that a man saved a little girl from gangsters, and for both of their protection, no photos were released. Lita told the class that it was Izuku that saved her. His brother is a pro hero that was there and saw Izuku holding the girl. Why is it always him, the coward, that left his class? Bakugo thought. Okay, students, as you can see, we're going to have a young guest for a while, Professor Aizawa said. But don't worry about that. What should concern some of you is the open house next week. All of your parents have been invited, and with the exception of one, all of them are coming, Professor Aizawa said with a grin on his face. Izuku saw the little table that had coloring books and crayons was set up next to his table. Look, Eri, they have a table for you. Would you like to sit and color? Izuku asked. Eri said, I have to go to the bathroom. Achiko said, I'll take you. Tsuyu said, I'll go too. Izuku isn't allowed into the girls' bathroom. Eri looked at Izuku, and he smiled at her and said, it's okay, they will take care of you. Eri reached out with both her hands, and Achiko and Tsuyu took her hands and left the class. Bakugo asked, hey, Professor Aizawa, who parents can't make it? Professor Aizawa said it's none of your concern as he looked at Izuku. Bakugo saw the look and laughed. Even your parents don't like you enough to show up to open house. Izuku looked at Professor Aizawa and reached out towards Bakugo with his right hand. Izuku canceled out everyone's quirk. Bakugo's arms were pinned to his body, and he was pulled hard towards Izuku's open hand. Oh no, shouted Professor Aizawa as he began to run to try stopping Izuku. Bakugo's throat slammed into Izuku's waiting palm, and Izuku began to squeeze. Bakugo tried to move, but couldn't move a muscle. Izuku looked him in the eyes and said in a low growl, if you ever mention my parents again, there won't be enough of you left to regret it. Gulp once if you understand me. Professor Aizawa grabbed Izuku's arm and asked him to please release Bakugo. Bakugo gulped once, then he was violently thrown back, but before he could slam into the wall, he stopped. Bakugo now had full control of his body again. Everyone saw it. Fear was etched on Bakugo's face as he was rubbing his throat. Izuku lowered his arms and simply said, this was your first and only warning. Izuku, Dean's office now. Bakugo hallway. Now Professor Aizawa shouted. Izuku finally realized Professor Aizawa was holding his arm, and when he looked, and the man he considered family shame washed over him. Izuku lowered his head and said in a low voice, yes, sir. The class saw the look of shame and pain on his face as he exited the room. Momo stood up and said that she was going to escort him there after she picked up Eri. Professor Aizawa agreed, and Momo went after him. Aizawa walked up to Bakugo and escorted him out of the class. You really poked the bear, you know that. You have no idea what Izuku has been through, the professor said. You're lucky he let you go because he canceled out everyone's quirk to include mine. If Izuku wanted, a nobody short of All Might himself could have reached you, Professor Aizawa said. I can't help it if even his mother can't take time off to visit her son's school, Bakugo said. His mother is dead, the professor said in a low voice. She was killed right in front of him when he was still a child, he continued. Bakugo lowered his head. I didn't know that, he said. Did a lot of things that you don't know about him, and it's none of your business, the professor said. But know this, if you think that Izuku is strong, just know that he's been sandbagging this whole time to keep people from being afraid of him, the professor said. So count your lucky stars that he's a really nice guy, and this was all that happened to you, the professor said. Momo saw Eri, and the girls walked towards her and said, Eri, come with me so we can meet up with Izuku. Is everything all right? Achiko asked. Momo shook her head no and said, we'll talk after class, as she leaned down to pick Eri up. As Momo rounded the corner, she heard sniffing when she saw Izuku. He was sitting on the floor with tears in his eyes. Eri began to squirming until Momo put her down and she ran to Izuku. When Izuku saw Eri, he opened his arms, and she ran to him. She hugged him as he hugged her back. Momo stood there and watched as this little girl comforted Izuku. Why are you crying? Eri asked. Because I am weak, because I lost my temper, and because I know better, Izuku said. Eri looked at Izuku and said, you're not weak, you made the bad men go away. There's more to being strong than stopping bad people, Izuku said. Sometimes being strong is being able to stop yourself when you get angry or to push forward when you're afraid, Izuku said. Momo walked up to them and simply said, sometimes you just have to accept that you're human and work on your weaknesses. Izuku looked up at Momo and said, I have to be better than that if I want to set a good example for Eri. What I did was wrong on so many levels, he continued. Momo noticed that he never let go of Eri stroking her hair as he held her. She nuzzled into his chest as she hugged him back. Momo kneeled down and said, Izuku, you're one of the nicest people I know. You're the type of man I hope to marry one day. With that being said, you're still human. Learn from this mistake and don't make the same one again, she continued as she reached out to him. To her surprise, he took her hand and let her help him to his feet as he continued to hold Eri in his other arm. Thank you, Izuku said. I think I really needed to hear that, but now I have to go to the dean's office. I'll walk with you if you don't mind, Momo said. Izuku said, thank you, let's go, and they headed towards the dean's office. Izuku knocked on the dean's door and heard the dean say enter. Izuku walked in followed by Momo, and she shut the door behind them. What can I do for you, the dean asked. Izuku said that Professor Aizawa sent him here after an incident in class. The dean scratched his chin and said, okay, Izuku, please step out. I want to hear Miss Yairo's side of the story first, then I'll hear yours. Momo said, I wasn't involved in the incident. I just escorted him here after I brought Eri to him. Dean Izu said, but you did see what happened, didn't you? Yes, I did, Momo said. Then I would like to hear your side of the story. Then Mr. Yagi can tell me his side, and I'm sure Professor Aizawa will tell me his. Izuku stepped out, and Momo told him what happened, even how she found him in the hallway. Thank you, Miss Yairozu. You can go back to class, and please send Mr. Yagi, and the dean said. Izuku was still carrying Eri, and she was still hugging him. Izuku was still stroking her hair. Dean Nizu wondered if Izuku realized he was still stroking this little girl's hair. Please sit, the dean said. After Izuku sat, he said, I'm sorry I lost my temper. I know better, I let you down. Dean Nizu said, you're not the first student, nor will you be the last student to get an argument in class. It was more than an argument, Izuku said. Professor Aizawa walked in and stood by the dean as Izuku explained how he felt. Izuku, you're in a class of very powerful young adults. Striving to be heroes' tempers are going to flare, the dean said. Izuku, you're not the first altercation I've had to deal with in class, Aizawa said. But you're way too powerful to lose control like that, oh? And don't think that I'm going to let the fact that you canceled my quirk go. You owe me for that one, Aizawa continued. But you didn't punch him or worse, so I'm going to make your punishment informal, so head back to class, and I'll talk with you later. Dean Nizu told Aizawa what Momo told him about after she found him in the hallway, and how Eri has a calming effect on Izuku. So do you think it was a good idea that the girl stay with him? Aizawa asked. I don't know, I think that we train a warrior, and Eri is making him into a compassionate man, the dean said. He's always been kind, Aizawa said. True, All Might taught him well, but he always had a hard time expressing his feelings, the dean said. You've been around him enough to know the only times he really looks happy is when he is sparring with All Might, or if he figures out other applications with his quirk, the dean continued. Aizawa agreed. But for the first time I've seen genuine compassion in his eyes, and it's thanks to that little girl, Dean Nizu said. The downside is if anything happens to that little girl, we may not be able to put Izuku back together again, Aizawa said. Eri really enjoyed her coloring books during class. When class was over, Izuku and Eri walked up to Ku, and Izuku asked if Satsuki was going to be home tomorrow, because he wanted to introduce her to Eri. Tsuyu smiled and said that Satsuki would be happy to see him and would love to meet Eri. I have to go, but I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku said. Izuku picked Eri up and left the class. Momo called Achiko, Hu, and Mina over. She told Achiko and Tsuyu what happened after they left with Eri. First, she told them that Izuku knew that they followed him to the cemetery. Then how Eri calmed him down, she continued. I wish you could have taken a picture of that. I would have loved to have seen it, Achiko said. Momo pulled out her phone and smiled. I don't have that picture, but I do have one I know you're going to love. She showed them the pictures of Izuku and Eri asleep on the sofa. You have to send us, that, Tsuyu said. Mina asked, how did you get those pictures? Momo explained that she had Izuku's phone after he ran into Eri, and he left before she could give it back. Then his dad sent him the pictures, and she forwarded them to herself. The pictures of Izuku sleeping with Eri spread like wildfire after Mina got a copy of it. All the girls from Class 1A and 1B and some of the girls from the support class got them. Izuka never really showed his softer side in school, so the pictures of him sleeping with Eri on his chest made all of the girls' heart flutter. When Izuka got home, he told Eri to change into play clothes because he was going to take her to the park. Izuku changed his clothes and waited for Eri by the door. She came running out and they left. Eri never been to a playground before, and she was a little nervous about going down the slide for the first time. Izuku waited for her at the bottom, and she slid down. Izuku caught her at the bottom and picked her up, swinging her into the air. For the first time in Eri's life, she had real fun. The mothers in the playground couldn't help but stare at the well-built young man playing with the child. They hoped that he would be showing up more often to give them something forward to seeing. Across the street, two figures stopped as they saw a familiar face, and they realized that it was Eri. The boss was going to be very happy that they finally found her. They left the area before anyone could notice them. The two members of the Shy Hasiaki entered their headquarters and reported directly to Chronostasis, letting him know that they saw Eri in a playground with some very built guy playing with her. Chronostasis knew who the guy was. He spent the last 3 days trying to find any information on him and has been coming up empty. He looked at his underlings and said, "I want surveillance on that park for the next 3 weeks. I want to know what time they get there, and what time they leave. Don't follow them for now. This guy has to be very well connected because I can't find anything on him, and if gets wind of us following him, we'll never see Eri again. I'll let Overhaul know. Great job, man." When Izuku and Eri got home, she told Izuku that she never was allowed to go outside to play. The bad people would buy her toys, but nobody would play with her. These last couple of days were like a dream to her. She even loves that when she says she had a bad dream, that he picks her up and places her on his chest. Eri told him that she can hear his heart, and it helps her go back to sleep. For the last 2 nights, Eri has ended up on his chest. Izuku was going to get her a big teddy bear to hold, but after hearing that, he changed his mind for now. "Tomorrow I'm going to introduce you to a girl your age, so you can play with her for a while. How does that sound?" Izuka asked. Eri got excited and said okay. "But for now I need you to take a bath and wash your hair." "Okay," Izuka said. "Izuka, can you please wash my hair again?" Eri asked. "I like that you don't get soap in my eyes," she continued. Izuku said, "Okay, let me know when you're in the tub and ready, and I'll wash your hair." When All Might walked in, Izuku was sitting at the kitchen table in shorts and a t-shirt doing homework. "Where's Eri?" All Might asked. "She's in her room asleep for now," Izuku said. "For now?" All Might asked. "She has been having bad dreams, and she walks into my room, and I place her on my chest, and she eventually goes back to sleep." "Dad, I asked her about that, and she said that hearing my heart calms her down." All Might smiled at his son and simply said, "You're doing great. That child doesn't remember what it is to be loved. She never knew what a safe place was until she met you," he continued. "Did I do that when I was young?" Izuku asked. All Might said, "Yes, you did, but you didn't do it for long." Izuku looked at his father, then lowered his head and said, "I messed up at school today." All Might sat down next to his son and listened. When Izuku was done explaining what happened, All Might hugged his son and apologized. "I wish I could be there as your father, but if I did that, people will think that you're getting special treatment. I know it's not fair to you and how hard you've been working." Izuku hugged his father, and this simple act made him feel a little better. The hug was interrupted by a little voice saying she had a bad dream. All Might smiled at Izuku and said, "A father's job is never done. I'll see you in the morning." Izuku got up and walked over to Eri. She lifted her arms so that he could pick her up. He lay down on his bed with her on his chest. He gently stroked her hair, and within a couple of minutes, she was asleep. Izuku smiled and fell asleep shortly after she did. Izuku woke Eri up and said it's time to get up. After Eri got dressed, Izuku fixed her hair. He learned how to by watching YouTube. He had been up for a while sparring with his father. Izuku made them breakfast while All Might packed their lunch. All Might told Izuku to start taking the car to school. "I don't want you taking the train for now. Eri needs to get used to normal transportation, just like you did." All Might tossed Izuku the keys and reminded Izuku of his appointment. Eri was a little sad that they were taking the car. She liked being in the air with Izuku. When they walked up to the gate, they saw Achiko, Momo, Mina, and Tsuyu waiting for them. This made Eri happy. As they were walking to class, Izuku noticed that a lot of the female student body were staring at him, and Eri whispering to each other, then giggling as they walked away. Izuku asked the girls if they knew what that was about. The girls acted like they didn't know what he was talking about. Bakugo saw Izuku enter. He felt his anger turn to hate. Izuku actually made him afraid. Then he remembered what the professor said, and then his anger turned to disgust with himself. He would have probably reacted much worse than Izuku had. Bakugo was so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice that Izuku walked up to him. Bakugo, I want to apologize for how I reacted yesterday. I was wrong for that. Bakugo was stunned. He really didn't know what to say. It was Kirishima that broke the silence by saying how manly Izuku was for apologizing. Yeah, well, forget about it, Bakugo said. Just remember this doesn't make us even, he continued. Izuku didn't say another word. He just went back to his desk and sat down. Eri got up and asked if she could sit on his lap. Izuku reached down and sat Eri on his lap. The girls in the class began taking pictures when the professor walked in and began the lesson. Izuku, Eri, Achiko, Momo, and Mina were sitting at a table in the cafeteria when Pony walked up to them. Eri looked at her and leaned into Izuku. Aren't you a cutie? I just want to pinch your cheek, she said. It's okay, Eri, this is Pony. She is very nice. Eri looked at Pony and said, you have horns just like me. Pony smiled and said, you have a cute horn. Can I touch them? Eri asked. Pony smiled and leaned down. Eri gently touched her horns, then reached up and touched her own. They feel the same, she said. Can I touch your horn? Pony asked. Okay, Eri said. Pony touched her horn and said, you're right, they do feel the same. I love your hair. Who fixed it for you? Pony asked. Izuku did, Eri said. All of the girls looked at him. I learned by watching YouTube, Izuku said. I thought your hair was gray, Pony said. Izuku washed my hair, Eri said with a big smile on her face. Izuku looked at the time and quickly said it's time for us to head back to class. After class, Izuku put Eri into the car seat and headed up to his appointment with Baru. Eri fell asleep on the way to his appointment. He used his quirk to keep her asleep. When he entered Baru's office, he sat down with Eri on his lap. Baru wasn't surprised to see Eri. So you told her what happened. But she was surprised to show how gentle he was with her. When Izuku spoke, he told her how conflicted he was. He genuinely wanted friends, but he was terrified to lose them. He spoke of how he lost control in class when Bakugo insulted his parents. Baru couldn't believe how Izuku turned out the way he did. It was a testament to how All Might raised him. Izuku was strong, but kind. He had a strong conviction. Most in Izuku's shoes would have been cruel and lashed out at the world. But here he was raising a child that he saved. He always put the needs of others before his own. Baru looked at Izuku and told him that it was okay for him to have friends, and it was normal for him to be worried. She reminded him that everyone in that class was there to become heroes. They weren't weak and needed his protection, and that he should slowly allow them into his life. When their time was up, Izuku stood up with Eri. She nuzzled into his chest while she slept. Izuku smiled down at her and said, I'll see you later, and left. Tsuyu opened the door. When she heard the knocking, Izuku was standing there with Eri partially hiding behind his legs. Eri smiled when she saw Tsuyu. When Satsuki saw Izuku, he kneeled down and she ran to him and hugged him. Eri was surprised to see how the little girl just ran to Izuku. Eri, this is Satsuki. She's Tsuyu's little sister. Eri said hi. Satsuki asked Eri, does she like dolls? Eri said yes. Come with me and I'll show you my dolls, and both of the little girls ran off. Thank you for letting me bring Eri over, Izuku said. Where's your brother? Izuku asked. He's at a baseball game today. My father should be home soon, he said. The door opened and Baru entered with an arm full of groceries. Izuku quickly got up and helped her with all the bags. Baru was surprised at Izuku and thanked him for helping her. Izuku took the groceries to the kitchen. Tsuyu followed him so she could start putting the groceries away. I'm surprised to see you. What brings you over? Baru asked. I wanted to introduce Eri to someone her age, Izuku said. Well, since you're here, stay for dinner. I insist, Baru said. How did you meet Izuku? Satsuki asked Eri while she was showing her room and favorite dolls. He saved me from the bad men, Eri said. You too, he saved me and my sister, Satsuki said. I wish he would come over more. He is really nice, Satsuki said. Eri said, if you want, I could ask him to bring me over again. Satsuki grabbed Eri's hands and said, really, I would like to play with you again too. Eri smiled and said, I'll ask him to bring me over again. Do you live with him? Satsuki asked. Eri smiled and said, "Yes, I do." The two girls began playing, happy that they both got what they wanted. Dinner was ready, and Izuku went to get the girls. Izuku wasn't paying attention when he tripped on the skateboard. Tsuyu reached out to grab him and fell with him. Izuku instinctively pulled her into him. When Tsuyu opened her eyes, Iz was inches from Izuku's face. Izuku was looking into her eyes and asked her if she was okay. Baru heard the crash and ran in and simply said, "Oh my." The front door opened and her father and brother walked in. Tsuyu turned beet red all the way down to her neck. Eri and Satsuki ran into the room to see what happened. Everybody was now looking at the two on the floor, and Ganma said, "Will someone explain to me what's going on over here?" Izuku began to blush when he realized how close Tsuyu was to him, and now the entire family was staring at them. Mercifully, dinner went smoothly. Everyone enjoyed the meal and the conversation. Ganma found he had a new respect for the young man. Not only did he save this little girl, he was now raising her. Izuku was proving that he was a man to be respected. Even when they fell, his first instinct was to pull Tsuyu into him and take the brunt of the fall so she wouldn't get hurt. Satsuki asked Izuku if he was going to be Eri's new daddy. Izuku looked at Eri and smiled and said, "Yes, I am." Eri jumped out of her seat and hugged Izuku. When Izuku and Eri got home, Eri was still glowing from the fact that Izuku was going to be her new dad. When she saw All Might, she ran over to him and told him he kneeled down and hugged her. He told her that makes him her grandpa. She looked a little confused until he explained that it meant he was Izuku's dad. Eri didn't really understand at the moment. It just made her happy that her little family grew by one more. She was no longer alone in this world, in this house. She had her father and grandfather who loved her. Izuku told Eri that when they were in school that they couldn't tell anyone that All Might was her grandpa, that it was a secret. Izuku and Eri waited by the gates when they saw the girls walking up to them. Eri told Tsuyu that she had fun yesterday and couldn't wait to play with Satsuki again. Mina, Achiko, and Momo looked at Tsuyu, and she told them that they set up a play date for Eri so she could have someone her age to play with. "It was cute when Tsuyu fell on top of my daddy, and both of them turned red," Eri said. All the girls froze when Eri said that Izuku was her daddy. Tsuyu knew that it was brought up at dinner, but she didn't think that Eri would start calling him that at school. It was Achiko who spoke next when her mind started to catch back up to the rest of what Eri said. Tsuyu fell on top of her daddy and began to blush, Achiko said. Satsuki was sad when Tsuyu didn't try to kiss him, Eri said. Izuku and Tsuyu both began to blush. Izuku picked Eri up and said, "Let's go to class before we're late." Momo, Achiko, and Mina began questioning Tsuyu as they all walked into class. All Might burst into the classroom with his usual flair, and Eri got so excited to see him. She didn't call him Grandpa, but she jumped out of her seat and ran up to him, reaching out her arms. All Might kneeled down and scooped her up in a hug, and Eri squealed out in joy. The class thought nothing of it. Every child gets excited when they see All Might. "Okay, class, it's time to change into you hero costumes and head out to training ground Gamma." All Might put Eri down, and she ran back to Izuku. Achiko walked over to Eri and asked Eri to go with her, because she wasn't allowed in the boys' changing room. Izuku kneeled down and said, "It's okay, go with Achiko. I'll see you after I change." Izuku leaned in and kissed Eri's forehead. Eri reached out, and Achiko took her hand and walked out. In the girls' locker room, all of the girls were talking about how cute it was that Izuku leaned and kissed Eri like that. Eri sat next to Achiko while she changed into her hero costume and said, "You look pretty." Achiko blushed and said, "Thank you." Momo walked up to Eri and said, "Do you want a costume like your daddy?" Eri said yes. "Daddy," Toru exclaimed. "Yes, Izuku is Eri's new daddy," she said. Momo's chest began to glow and an Eri-sized costume popped out. Eri looked at Momo and said, "Thank you." Then she asked, "Can you help me put on my daddy normally helps me get dressed?" Momo smiled and said, "Okay, first let's get you out of your clothes." Achiko put Eri's clothes in her locker as Momo finished dressing her up. When Eri stepped out with Achiko and Momo, Izuku was waiting by the door. His eyes lit up when he saw Eri wearing his costume. He picked her up, spinning her in the air. He couldn't explain why, but this brought him so much joy. He looked at Momo and said, "Did you make this with your quirk?" Momo blushed as she said yes. Izuku hugged Momo, squishing Eri in between them. Momo turned bright red, and Achiko both got a little jealous over that hug. Izuku let her go and said, "Come on, Eri, I know someone who will love to see you in this," and headed toward the training grounds. When All Might saw Eri, he couldn't help but smile at her. He asked her to join him to help with the class. Eri ran over to him, and he picked her up and said, "Eri has taken me hostage," and it was a race to save him. The class thought it was cute that Eri took him hostage, but was excited to see who could get to him first. All Might assigned to the groups, then he looked at Eri and said, "Hold on." She hugged him, and he leaped towards the center of town. Group 1 was Izuku, Bakugo, Zero, and Lita. Bakugo looked at his competitors and said, "Hey, you extras, get ready to loose." All Might's voice rang out and said, "Begin." Everyone sprang into action. Explosions rang out as Bakugo leaped into the air. Lita took off in a full sprint, his mufflers glowing because of the speed he was running. Zero, using his tape to swing through town. Izuku lifted the ground he was on and shot towards the center faster than his classmates. Izuku was the first to make it, with Zero coming in second, Bakugo third, and Lita last. Eri squealed when she saw her daddy rushing towards her. Izuku jumped off his platform and kneeled down as Eri ran to him. She hugged him tightly when Bakugo got close, his explosions scaring her. Izuku hugged her, making her feel safe. When Bakugo landed, Eri said, "You're loud." Bakugo looked at the little girl, then he looked at Izuku and kept his voice civil. "My quirk is loud by nature," he said, then walked away. Eri looked at her dad and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Izuku, though back to middle school, Bakugo never changed. "No, sweetie, you haven't. Some people are just that way. But don't worry, one school out, I'll take you to the park, okay?" Eri smiled and said, "Okay." After school, Izuku took Eri to the park again. She loved playing on the swings. Izuku would push her, and she would squeal in joy. A little girl her age asked if Eri wanted to play with her. Eri looked at her dad, and he smiled at her and said, "It's fine, have fun." The moms that were in the park loved how the young man was playing with the child. One of the moms sent her daughter to ask the little girl to play with them. Izuku sat on a bench watching Eri have fun when a woman walked up to him. "Is that your little sister?" the woman asked. Izuku smiled and said, "No, she's my daughter." Another woman walked up and sat with them and asked, "Where's her mother?" Izuku simply said, "She's no longer with us." "Are you single?" another one of the moms asked. Izuku began to blush and said yes when he noticed two men slowly getting closer to where Eri was playing with the other kids. "He doesn't look that tough. I bet we could knock him out and snatch Eri before anyone could notice our faces," said the first shy Hasiaki members. "Remember what Chrono said, don't try to get the girl," the second shy Hasiaki member said. "But think about the clout we could get if we brought Eri back," said the first. "I don't think I want to be the one to explain to Chrono how we botched our mission if we fail," said the second shy Hasiaki member. "Listen, with our powers, we could take the girl and be gone before the heroes get here. I'll attack the guy, and you snatch the girl. It's simple," said the first shy Hasiaki member. They were both looking at Izuku when they both began to feel uneasy when he stopped talking and began staring at them. Then the women and children began staring at them. Izuku's eyes started glowing green, and then women and children's eyes began to glow as well. Both of the criminals began backing away, not wanting to get caught, afraid of the unnatural sight. It was bad enough that we're going to have to explain that they were spotted. Both men fled the area, not wanting those unnatural eyes staring at them a moment longer than necessary. Izuku released the illusion. The women and children didn't even realize what happened. Izuku watched as both men backed away, then began to run. The women were so focused on Izuku, they never noticed two men beginning to sprint away. Izuku smiled at the women and said that he had to leave, but they would see them soon. Izuku called Eri, and she came running. "It's time for us to leave." "Can we come back again?" Eri asked. Izuku smiled and said, "Not today, but we can come back so you can play." Eri smiled and took his hand as they left. When they got home, Izuku went into the kitchen and began preparing dinner, and he told Eri to wash up. All Might arrived when they were setting the table for dinner. Eri was already in her All Might PJs. All Might washed his hands and joined them at the dinner table. Izuku asked All Might if he could get Eri a pendant just like the one he bought for him. All Might instantly understood why and said sure. All Might looked at Eri and asked her what was her favorite color. Green like my daddy's eyes. All Might smiled and said okay. After dinner, they sat in the living room and watched one of Eri's favorite movies, How to Train Your Dragon. When it was over, Izuku told Eri it was time for bed. Eri got up and gave All Might a hug and kiss goodnight, and asked Izuku to tuck her in. When Izuku was done, he sat next to All Might and told him about what happened in the park. All Might was always amazed with how versatile Izuku's power really was. But what really amazed All Might this time was how Izuku used his power. He cast an illusion that scared the villains, and none of the people around him knew what was happening. Achiko was in her apartment. She felt like she was falling behind the other girls that were trying to gain Izuku's affection. Momo was going to have dinner with him this weekend. Already has had dinner with him twice, plus her little sister is Eri's friend. So he'll be going over just so Eri could play with her sister. Then it hit her parents are going to be in town for open house at school. She'll invite him to meet her parents while they're in town. That thought warmed her heart. She pulled out her cell phone and called her parents to let them know to bring some nice clothes for dinner. She was going to finally introduce them to Izuku. Momo was nervous tomorrow Izuku was coming over for dinner. She and her mother were going over all the details to ensure that everything was perfect. Her father walked into their great hall and looked at both of the women that he loved working together with smiles on their faces. He smiled and said that everything looked great, but Izuku didn't strike him as the type to be into anything this fancy. Momo looked at her father and simply said that is no excuse for us to not place our best foot forward. You really care for this young man, he father said in a soft voice. I do, Momo said. Dad, he's amazing. I've never met someone so humble. Nobody in our class knows that he is rich besides me. He helps everyone without a second thought. He puts the needs of everyone else above his own. Dad, if you could have seen him when he saved me or when he saved that little girl. Dad, I really want you to like him, and I hope I can get him to feel the same about me. Izuku woke up with Eri nuzzled on his chest. He began stroking her hair, and she lifted her head and said, Good mornings, Daddy. Izuku had tried sneaking out of the bed one time, leading to Eri having a panic attack. He left her and began crying. Luckily, Izuku was in the gym and left the door open and heard her crying. He calmed her down and promised that he would wake her up and let her know he was exercising. Eri, I'm going for a run. I'll be back soon, Izuku said. Eri said, Okay, Daddy, as she laid back down and went back to sleep. Izuku was quick. He could run a 4-minute mile for 7 miles before having to slow down. 27 minutes later, Izuku entered the house and began lifting weights. Eri entered the gym when he was finishing his workout. Daddy, I'm hungry, Eri said. Izuku smiled and said, Okay, honey, what would you like to eat? I want a cheese omelet. It was Izuku's favorite breakfast, too. All Might picked it up when he lived in America and introduced it to Izuku. Izuku was making breakfast when All Might walked in. It smells good in here, he said. Eri was cracking eggs while Izuku was cooking. She was concentrating, trying not to make a mess. Izuku said, I'm making cheese omelets. Would you like one? All Might smiled and said, Yes, thank you. The family sat and ate together, talking and laughing when All Might asked Izuku if tonight he having dinner with Miss Yaoyorozu and her family. Yes, it is, Izuku said. Eri, would you like to stay here with Grandpa and watch movies and eat ice cream while Daddy is gone? Eri's face lit up. Really, Grandpa, she asked. Really, I have tonight off? All Might said. Daddy, can I please? Izuku kneeled down and said, Okay. Eri hugged him, then said, Daddy, you stink. Okay, I'm going to shower, Izuku said. Izuku took Eri to the park after his shower. She really enjoyed when her daddy pushed her on the swings. The usual group of kids showed up with their moms, and Izuku let Eri play with the kids and sat down. He paid closer attention to his surroundings, looking for things that didn't fit into the normal routine. The ladies began talking to him and began some mild flirting. They loved how was with Eri wishing that their husbands would spend half the time with their children as Izuku would with his. Izuku noticed the time and said, Okay, Eri, it's time to go. Eri said goodbye to the kids and ran to her father and took his hand. Izuku said goodbye to the ladies, and they headed home. Izuku got ready to meet up with Momo and her family as Eri showered and put on her favorite All Might PJs. As Izuku kissed Eri's forehead as he was getting ready to leave, All Might walked into the room and said, Enjoy yourself, and don't worry about Eri, we're going to have a good time. Izuku smiled and said, "Thanks, Dad." Momo was excited when the maid said Izuku pulled into the driveway. The butler opened the door when Izuku walked up. This took Izuku by surprise. He didn't even get a chance to knock on the door. Izuku noticed that the butler was wearing an earpiece and was in really good shape. "Please follow me, Mr. Yagi," the man said as they walked. Izuku noticed the outline of a gun in the man's vest. He must be part of their security as well. Izuku was very impressed by the tasteful art decorations. When they entered the Great Hall, Izuku was blown away by the sheer size of it. It was bigger than the gym in his house. Izuku looked around at the maids and could tell how they carried themselves, that all of them were trained in martial arts, and all of them wore similar earpieces. The head maid was a taller than average woman, and was a pretty woman, but you could tell that she wasn't someone that you wanted to mess with. Izuku finally looked at Momo and almost lost a step. He was taken back by just how beautiful she looked. Momo saw the look on his face and began to blush. Momo's parents both watched as Izuku entered. He seemed to take in everything. He didn't look at the decorations, but he looked at the staff. He knew that they weren't normal maids. He took in the small details. Then they noticed his reaction when he saw their daughter. Momo's mom smiled. That was the reaction she hoped for. Her father stood up and said, "Please, Mr. Yagi, sit down," and he gestured to the seat next to Momo. "Please, you can just call me Izuku if it's okay with you." Momo's dad smiled, then said, "Okay, Izuku, you can call me Hiko, and you remember my wife, Tomo." Izuku bowed deeply and said, "Thank you for inviting me into your home," before taking his seat. Izuku looked at Momo and complimented her beauty. Momo's blush deepened as she complimented him. Tomo asked Izuku, "Where's Eri?" "She is with her grandfather. He wanted to spend his day off with her, or so he told me. I think that he just wanted to give me a chance to just relax and enjoy myself," Izuku said. "I'll be honest with you, I was surprised when Momo told me that you took in the girl," Hiko said. "I thought it was sweet of you. How are you adjusting to being a single father?" Tomo asked. "It was hard at first, to be honest with you," Izuku said. "She still has nightmares, and she ends up in my bed after them," Izuku said. "I know, I saw the picture," Tomo said. That took Izuku by surprise. "Momo showed me the pictures of Eri sleeping on your chest while you were on the sofa." Izuku looked at Momo when she said, "I had your phone when your dad sent the pics, and I forwarded them to myself." Izuku felt his cheeks turn red as he began to blush. "Speaking of your father, what does yours do?" Hiko asked. "He is upper management for the Mitsubishi Corporation," Izuku said. "And your mother?" Tomo asked. Izuku lowered his head and said she died when he was still a child. "I'm sorry, I can see this still hurts you," Tomo said. "Don't worry," Izuku said. "My father and I have a wonderful relationship." The three enjoyed their meal, and when they were done, Momo's parents thanked Izuku for joining them. Izuku thanked them for inviting him. Momo said, "I'll walk you to the door." When they got to the door, she asked him if he wouldn't mind following her for a moment. Izuku smiled and said okay. Momo gently took his hand and led him to the giant fountain. She looked him in the eyes and apologized for forwarding the pics to herself. Izuku smiled at her and asked who else has seen the pics. When she told him, Izuku blushed again. "No wonder I was getting all those strange looks." Momo took off her shoes and stepped into the fountain, enjoying the cool feeling on her feet. Izuku looked at her and said, "You look beautiful tonight." Momo's parents watched on the security cameras, wishing they could hear what they were saying. When they saw Izuku extend his hand to help their daughter out of the fountain, he gave her a hug before backing up, then leaving. Tomo looked at her husband and said, "He truly is a gentleman. He didn't even try to get a kiss goodbye after he helped her out of the fountain." Hiko continued to look at the young man leave. "I wonder why he lied about what his father does. But he is a good young man, and I will offer him a position in our company. Someone with his keen eyes will be sure to continue to lead our company with our daughter when you and I are ready to retire." Tomo smiled as she leaned into her husband. Momo entered her house, feeling wonderful. She savored the way Izuku looked at her as he walked up to her. Then how he looked at her as he helped her out of the fountain. She was surprised by the hug he gave her. Izuku felt like he managed to pack on more muscle since the last time she felt his embrace. As Momo entered the house, she saw both of her parents waiting for her. Momo walked up to her parents when her father asked her, "What does Izuku's father do?" Momo was caught off guard by this question. Her father smiled at her and said, "That boy is an honest person, and I saw how uncomfortable he looked when he spoke about his father's job." If you want me to accept him into our family, tell me, and I know you already know. Momo lowered her head. Her mother walked up to Momo and lifted her chin and said, the reason we need to know is because your father wants to offer him a high position in the company. Tears began streaming from Momo's eyes. Really, she asked. Her father smiled and said, I'm a good judge of character, and I just want to speed up the documents as we accept him into our company. Momo hugged her mother and said softly, his father is All Might. Momo's mother pulled back from her and stared in shock. Her father walked up to her and hugged his daughter and said, I never thought I would have accepted the first boy you introduced to me. But not only did you bring a respectable, powerful, attentive young man, but he also the son of the #1 hero. I couldn't be more proud. Izuku walked into his house to find All Might and Eri sitting at a little table having a tea party. Izuku smiled as Eri saw her father walk in and said, you're just in time, Daddy. Izuku joined them at the little table and joined the tea party. Not too long after they put Eri to bed, and Izuku told his father about his night. Dad, I need some advice, Izuku said. All Might placed his hand on his son's shoulder and said, okay. Izuku began telling him how he felt about tonight. Izuku said, I don't know how I feel about her. I really like her, but there's 3 more that I really like as well. I don't know what to do, to be honest, Izuku said. I also have Eri, and right now, she needs me more than anything right now. All Might looked deep into his son's eyes and saw all of the bottled-up emotions trying to escape. Son, I'm not the best one to answer that question, but your next appointment with Baru is Wednesday. Izuku smiled and hugged his father and said, thank you, Dad. The next morning after breakfast, Izuku asked Eri if she would like to go to mall to help her get over the fear of crowds. But if it gets to be too much, let me know, and we'll leave, Izuku said. They arrived at the mall just in time for lunch. They both ordered the Taishika meal. Eri wanted the fish while Izuku got the beef. After they finished their meals, they began walking around the mall. Achiko's parents arrived at her apartment at 10. When Achiko opened the door, her dad pulled her in for a hug. Her mom asked if she was hungry. Achiko said, yes, I know a great place in the mall, then we can go dress shopping for when we invite Izuku and Eri over for dinner. Izuku bought Eri an ice cream cone for being such a brave girl. Eri was holding Izuku's hand when she saw Achiko. Eri called out to Achiko and waved with the hand holding her ice cream, causing it to tumble onto her shirt, then the floor. Eri's eyes began to water because not only did she drop her ice cream, she dirted her favorite shirt. Achiko's dad saw the little girl calling his daughter and tapped his daughter's shoulder and pointed to Eri. Achiko and her mother turned just in time to see the ice cream fall. Achiko's parents were both surprised by Izuku's actions. Izuku kneeled down and gently wiped the tears from Eri's eyes, then gently lifted her chin and kissed her forehead. It's okay, I'll get you another one. Okay, sweetie, Izuku said. But my shirt is dirty, Eri said. Izuku used his quirk and removed the stain and said much better, then stood up. Izuku used his quirk to clean Eri's mess when Achiko and her parents walked up them. Achiko introduced her parents to Izuku. Izuku bowed his head and greeted them, then asked Achiko to watch Eri for a minute so he could get her another ice cream. Izuku headed to the 3rd floor to buy Eri another ice cream. Hey, look over there. Is that who I think it is said? The first Shy Hasaikai member. It is said his partner and her green hair guardian isn't with her. As both men took a quick scan of the area, they quickly made their way to where Eri was, and one drew a large knife while the other drew a gun. Hello, Eri Long. Time no. See, if you don't want these people to get hurt, you'll come quietly with us. Achiko Quickie pulled Eri into her arms and defiantly told the 2 men, if you know what is good for you, I recommend you walk away right now. The gunman pulled the hammer back on his pistol and said, does it look like I'm playing a game with you? Eri yelled at the top of her lungs, Daddy, I need you. Izuku heard the yell and ran out the store and volute over the guardrail. As he took the 3-story drop, what he saw angered him to his core. Quick, shoot the girl, and I'll snatch Eri. The gunman fired the gun, and the bullets stopped 5 feet in front of Achiko. The 2 criminals looked in shock as Izuku landed right in front of the bullets. Izuku looked like the visage of death made real as he reached out and grabbed a bullet. You dare fire a gun at my daughter. Eri, Daddy wants you to close your eyes. Okay, Daddy, Eri replied, and the nightmare truly began. A few minutes before the attack, Achiko's mom said, I need to use the restroom, and her father said, "That sounds like a good idea. I have to go as well." When they stepped out of the restroom, they saw Achiko pulling Eri into her with a man pointing a gun at them. When Eri screamed out, everything happened in slow motion. Achiko's mom screamed out in horror for her daughter as the madman pulled the trigger and the gun barked. Pony was with her parents in the mall as she showed them around town. They wanted some ice cream when she heard a familiar voice scream out for her daddy. Izuku bolted out of the store that she and her parents were about to enter. He didn't hesitate. He leaped over the guardrail. Pony's parents looked in horror as the young man plummeted 3 stories. Pony and her parents barely made it to the guardrail when she heard a gun go off. Everyone watched in shock when a young man landed in front of the little girl and plucked a bullet out of the air as the rest of the bullets just hung there. Then he told the little girl to close her eyes. The young man began to change. Green fur started to grow. His already impressive build grew. Even more, his hands grew claws. He looked like a werewolf out of the world of nightmares. The 2 criminals began backing up. The criminal with the knife charged at Izuku, thrusting his large knife, trying to stab Izuku in the gut. Izuku caught his arm and slammed the man into the ground, the force of the impact knocking the criminal out. The gunman threw the empty gun at the monster. The creature caught the gun and crushed it in his powerful hand, then lunged forward and gripped the gunman by his chest and lifted him off the ground. The inhuman voice that the werewolf spoke in asked the criminal who sent you. "Please don't kill me." It was Chrono from the Shy Hasaikai. "Please, if you let us go, you will never see us again," the criminal pleaded. All Might busted into the mall when the report of gunshots came in. All Might moved quickly to find a large green monster holding a man and called out, "I am here." The criminal screamed, "Please arrest me, save me from this monster." Izuku pulled the criminal and then threw him towards All Might. Izuku watched as All Might became a blur and caught the criminal, and the crowd began to cheer. Izuku released the illusion and spun around just in time to catch Eri, who was running to him at top speed. Izuku pulled Eri into a tight hug. Izuku stood up, still holding Eri, and walked over to Achiko and pulled her into a tight one-arm hug. Achiko felt her heart rate spike as Izuku pulled her into his arm and hugged her. Then she felt the warmth of his breath by her ear as he thanked her for protecting Eri. Achiko's parents ran to them, and Izuku released Achiko, and her father checked his daughter for any injuries, then hugged his daughter. His wife joined in the family hug and began to cry as the joy of her daughter being safe overtook her. As All Might secured both of the criminals, Achiko's mother walked over to Izuku with tears still streaming down her face and pulled the young man into a hug and thanked him for saving her daughter again. Her father walked up right behind her and waited for his wife to let the young man go and shook his hand. Achiko's father said, "Would you please join us for dinner on Tuesday? I would like thank you properly for saving our daughter." Izuku smiled and said, "I would love to, but you don't have to thank me. Achiko protected Eri, and I am now in her debt." Achiko's face became crimson listening to Izuku talking with her father. Izuku finally put Eri down, and she ran over to Achiko, reaching up, and Achiko lifted Eri up. Eri hugged and thanked her for protecting her from the bad man. Pony told her parents that was the young man that she had feelings for. Pony's mother looked at her daughter and said, "I can see why you really like this young man, but it looks like you're not the only one who feels that way. I can see how in love that girl is from here. So unless you're ready to go after what you want, someone else is going to claim him." Pony looked back at Izuku and said, "Mom, he really is the strongest, nicest, and compassionate man I know. When the camp was attacked, he went out and fought 3 Nomu to keep the rest of us safe. He rescued that little girl from the Yakuza, and now he is raising her by himself." Pony's parents looked at the young man when her father said, "I would like for you to introduce us when we're at the school tomorrow." Pony's head whipped to her father and asked, "You really want to meet him?" "Yes, I would," he replied. That man leaped from the 3rd floor when he heard the little girl call out to him. Then he fought a man with a knife and a gun to protect a girl that's not even related to him by blood. I respect that, her father continued. "Okay, Dad," Pony said with a smile on her face. All Might and a police officer walked over to Izuku and Achiko and asked them what happened. Achiko spoke first, telling them how the 2 men approached, then threatened her and Eri, and how Eri yelled out to her father. Izuku said he heard Eri yell and leaped over the guardrail and saw the two armed men and how he took action. The police officer said that being that he was protecting his child, there won't be any criminal charges placed against Izuku for using his quirk to bring down these criminals. Izuku thanked the officer and told Eri that it's time for us to go home. Izuku said goodbye to Achiko and her parents and left the mall holding Eri's hand. When Izuku got Eri home, he felt the anger boil in his gut. Those criminals tried to take Eri from him. They even pulled a gun on Achiko and fired while Eri was standing in front of her. Had he been a second slower one, if not both of them, would have been shot. Izuku noticed a tugging on his arm and looked down. Eri was looking up at him with her big eyes and asked, "Are you okay, Daddy?" Those words hit Izuku like a truck. Izuku picked Eri up and hugged her and said, "No, I'm not okay. I was scared that they were going to hurt you." Eri's response surprised Izuku. She looked him in his eyes and said she wasn't afraid because she knew that he would protect her. She reached out and touched Izuku's cheek, and he leaned his head in her tiny hand. All Might got home to find Izuku sitting on the couch with his head lowered. All Might sat next to his son, and Izuku leaned in him. All Might felt his son's body shudder. All Might pulled Izuku in a powerful hug. Izuku asked in a small voice, "Is this how you felt every time I went out alone, scared that I would be taken?" "Yes," All Might said without hesitation. "This is why I trained you, so that when you went out I knew you were strong enough to defend yourself until I could get to you." Izuku looked up at his father and gave him a weak smile and thanked him. Izuku got up and went to check on Eri. All Might looked at his son, walked to Eri's room. A part of him felt his pain, part of him angry that Izuku had to learn this lesson so young. Eri woke up slightly confused. She didn't remember going to her father's room. She looked at Izuku and asked, "Daddy, why are you in my room?" Izuku smiled and said, "I had a bad dream." Eri didn't know why, but this answer made her laugh. Izuku got up and began his morning training routine. Then he got ready for school. Eri liked helping with making breakfast. After they ate, they packed their lunch and left for school. None of the girls waited by the gate, and Izuku remembered their parents would be here today. Izuku debated leaving and just spending the day with Eri, but this would set a bad example for her, and went to class. As they walked to class, Izuku heard a familiar voice call out to him. When he turned, he saw Pony waving, and her parents were with her. Eri waved at Pony as they waked up to them. Pony's dad introduced himself. "I'm Shio Tsunatori. This is my wife, Shiger. My daughter has spoken highly of you." "To be honest, I thought she was just talking up the guy that she likes," he continued. "We were at the mall yesterday and saw what you did to protect your child, and I want you to know I was very impressed." Izuku looked at Pony, who was blushing, but she didn't say a word. "We're going to karaoke bar. After we're done today, would you and Eri like to join us?" Eri looked at Izuku and asked what's a karaoke bar. When Izuku explained what it was, she got very excited, and he agreed to meet them. Shiger walked up to Izuku, looking him in the eyes, as if she was searching for something. Then she kneeled down and asked Eri, who fixed her hair. Eri smiled and said, "My daddy does." Shiger said, "You're just too cute," and stood up. "I'm looking forward to seeing you later." Pony asked Izuku for his phone number so she could let him know where to meet them, then lead her parent to Class 1B. As Izuku entered Class 1A, all of his classmates' parents were already in class, conversating amongst themselves. One of them was commenting on why was there a child's desk here until they saw Eri walking in. Izuku noticed that Momo's parents were in a deep conversation with Achiko's parents. Eri walked up to Achiko and thanked her for trying to protect her yesterday. Achiko picked Eri up and gave her a big hug. Achiko's mom joined the hug and said, "You were so brave yesterday." Eri said, "I knew that my daddy would protect us. He's strong." Momo's dad asked what happened yesterday. Achiko's mom told him about what happened at the mall and how Izuku jumped from the third story to save Eri and Achiko from the Yakuza. All eyes were now on Izuku, and he felt a little uncomfortable with all the attention focused on him. As all the parents and students began to whisper, Achiko's mom took Eri from Achiko and walked over to Izuku and asked if his parents were going to join them today because they wanted to meet the people who raised such a wonderful, brave man. Izuku said, "My mother passed away when I was a child, and my father won't be able to make it today." Baru saw the hurt on Izuku's face as he spoke, but he kept his head up and smiled. Baru just wanted to go over to him and hug him just so he wouldn't feel so alone. Momo's father walked over to Izuku and said, if your father can't be here today, would you mind if I stood with you? Achiko's father also walked up to him and said, I would be proud to stand with you after what you did for my daughter. Izuku looked at both of the men standing next to him and said, thank you, but both of you have your daughters here, and I couldn't keep you from them. Momo's father looked over to Momo and asked, would you mind if I stayed by Izuku? Momo blushed and said, no, Daddy. Achiko spoke before her dad could ask, I wouldn't mind at all, Dad. Both men said it's settled then. Professor Aizawa entered the class looking refreshed. He was followed by All Might. Before class started, Momo reminded her parents that only 5 people that knew that All Might was Izuku's father and not to reveal it to the class. Achiko greeted Momo and introduced her parents shortly after Izuku walked in with Eri. Achiko saw the pain in his eyes when her mom walked up to Izuku and asked to meet his parents. The whole class started to murmur when Izuku said that his mother died when he was still a child. Thankfully, shortly after Professor Aizawa walked in, and to the class's surprise, he was followed by All Might. Izuku beamed. When All Might walked in, he knew this was his way of supporting him. All Might smiled at his son and felt guilty that 2 men stood by his son because he didn't want anyone to know their secret. But he was also very happy because Izuku wouldn't be alone thanks to these 2 men. All Might quickly greeted the parents and told them that they were going to lead to the gym to meet the rest of the professors, then left the class so that the attention could remain on the students. Professor Aizawa introduced himself and told the students to lead their parents to the gym, and if any parents had questions for him, they could ask him now or wait until they got to the gym. To Izuku's surprise, Momo's dad walked up to Professor Aizawa and asked how was Izuku doing in his class. Achiko's dad smiled and joined Momo's dad. Professor Aizawa looked over to Izuku, who just nodded his head, so he began to tell them. Tsu's dad joined the other men curious about the young man. Izuku and Eri lead the 3 men to all of his different professors. This made Izuku happy, even though he would have preferred to have his father there with him. At least he had people who really wanted to know how he was doing in school to introduce to his other teachers. After the day was done, the professors said that tomorrow there will be a demonstration in the gym. Izuku's phone rang. Pony called and said meet us at Karaoke in Shibuya at 5. Pony's family arrived at the karaoke bar early. Pony's mom looked at her and said that young man may be kind, strong, and fearless, but he is truly broken on the inside. Pony looked at her mom and said, please tell me that you didn't use your quirk on him. I did, her mother said with no shame. You know, my quirk allows me to look into a person's eyes and see their emotional state. They can't hide who they really are from me. He is honest, kind, strong, brave, but he is also afraid, angry, fragile, and he is hiding something from everyone, she continued. Pony looked at her mom. Do you know what he's hiding? No, her mom said, but he is like a diamond hard, but if you hit it right, he will shatter. Her father placed his hand on his wife's shoulder and said, nobody's perfect, but the fact that you said that he is honest and kind, that's good enough for now. So let's just enjoy ourselves and pick out the songs we want to sing. When Izuku and Eri showed up, Pony's family was going through the list of songs to sing when Pony's dad called him over to sit next to Pony and to pick a couple of songs. Once the songs were selected, Pony's father said, Izuku, come with me and let's order some food. Izuku looked over to Eri and asked, what would you like? Jaiden, please, Eri said. With that, Izuku left with Shio. Pony asked Eri, does Izuku always fix your hair for you? Eri beamed and said yes. Pony's mom looked at her and asked, how does he treat you? Eri looked at her and said, he is very nice. He doesn't even get mad when I have bad dreams and wake him up. Really? Pony's mother asked. He places my head on his chest and gently pats my head until I go back to sleep, Eri said. He is teaching me how to cook and helps me with spelling and takes me to the park to play, she continued. Pony's mom was surprised to hear how much this young man does for this little girl. She turned her towards her daughter and smiled and said, I saw a song I want you to sing to him. When Izuku and Shio returned, Eri was smiling and sitting next to Pony's mom. Then the fun began. Pony's parents sang a duet, Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John and Kiki D. Eri giggled as the 2 adults danced and sang to each other. It was now Izuku's turn. He picked a song that made him think of his adopted father. He wanted to sing it to him for his birthday, so he might as well try it now. Izuku told them that he was going to sing this to his father for his birthday and asked them for their opinion. The song is In Case You Don't Live Forever by Ben Platt. The song hit Pony's parents the hardest. They truly didn't expect this from the man that leaped into danger with little regard to his own safety. Who is his father if he is following his path? They all clapped for him and told him that it was wonderful. Pony got up a little hesitant as she looked at Izuku. Her mother nudged her on, and Pony began. She sang Fix You by Coldplay. She looked into his eyes as she sang. She put all of her emotions into her words. She noticed that tears began to glisten on his cheeks as he focused on her. Eri leaned into Izuku, her eyes also watering. When Pony finished singing, she leaned in and gently touched Izuku's face and leaned in and kissed his forehead before backing up bowing. Izuku was lost in the moment listening to Pony sing. He didn't even realize that he was crying. He just continued to look at Pony as she sang. He felt Eri snuggle in and place his arm around her, but he never took his eyes off Pony. He was brought back to reality when Pony leaned and caressed his cheeks and kissed his forehead when she was done. He couldn't move until she released his cheeks. She blushed as she bowed. Eri wiped the tears from her eyes, then looked up to Izuku and said, "Daddy, you're crying too." Izuku looked at Eri and began wiping the tears from his eyes. He began blushing and got embarrassed that Eri saw him crying. Izuku got even more embarrassed when Eri looked at Pony and asked, "Does this make you my mommy now?" Pony blushed even harder. Izuku looked like a tomato as he began to speak. "Wait, what? Eri, what gave you that idea? None of the other girls kiss you, and you let her do it." Pony's mother took great pleasure hearing the little girl's honest remark. Pony's dad cleared his throat and said, "A kiss doesn't make your mom. But let's see what the future brings," he continued. Pony sat next to Eri and asked if she liked the song. Eri said that she liked the song, but it made her cry. Momo was eating dinner with her parents when her father asked if Momo knew that she and Izuku were in close competition for top grades academically. "You never said he was that smart." Momo's mom said. "I'm very impressed," she continued. "His teachers all say that he is very diligent in his studies, and even though he is now raising Eri, he hasn't slacked up in any of his classes." Momo beamed at her father. "So when are the two of you going to make it official?" her mother asked. Momo blushed then frowned. "I don't know," she said. "Even when he came over for dinner, he didn't make a move on me," she continued. "We know he didn't," her mom said. "But I can tell that he really likes you by how he looks at you," her father said. "What should I do?" Momo asked. To Momo's surprise, it was her dad that answered the question. "He is a humble, simple man. Ask Eri what he likes, and go from there," her dad said. "Bring him and Eri a homemade bento for lunch tomorrow and eat with them," he continued. The Achiko family was joined by the Azui family for dinner. The fathers really enjoyed talking with each other while escorting Izuku. When Achiko's dad found out that it was his daughters that Izuku saved from the slime villain, then how he reached out to them to let them know that he was sorry that he didn't get there sooner. Achiko's dad invited them to join them to learn more about this young man. Izuku seemed good to be true. Even his teachers said that he even helps the students that fall behind to catch them up to the rest of the class. Achiko's dad told Hugh's dad about how Izuku leaped from the third floor to save both Eri and Achiko, then turned into a werewolf to take down the villains. While the two men were talking, the women were prying into their daughter's relationship with this young man. Both of the older women enjoying the look of embarrassment on their daughters' faces. Achiko's mom reminded her of the hug in the mall and how Izuku whispered in her ear. Tsuyu's mom told them how Tsuyu fell on top of Izuku and how both of them turned as red as tomatoes. Both girls began blushing as the women began to giggle. It was Baru that said, even though Izuku is definitely doing a great job with Eri, she needs to have a mother figure in her life. That statement made both girls blush even more when they looked at each other. When Izuku got home from the karaoke bar, he was carrying Eri, who fell asleep on the way home. She really enjoyed herself. He remembered Pony's warm lips kissing his forehead when his father spoke, bringing him back to the moment. "Looks like Eri is exhausted. Where did you go?" his father asked. "We went to a karaoke bar with Pony's family. We ate, sang, and we enjoyed ourselves," Izuku said. "Dad, Pony sang a sad song for me. I didn't even realize I was crying," Izuku said. "When she was done, she leaned in and kissed my forehead," he continued. Then Eri asked her if she was going to be her new mom. I wanted to melt into the ground. I was so embarrassed, Izuku said. While I was driving home, I gave a lot of thought. Should I begin to date to try to find a mom for Eri? She deserves to have a mom, or are the girls that I hang out with enough, Izuku asked. All Might looked into his son's eyes and said, you shouldn't rush into a relationship for Eri, All Might said. But I do think that you should start thinking about what is it you want in a relationship, and maybe you should go out on dates, he continued. Before you take anyone seriously, you need to see how they treat Eri, and do they include her in the things that they plan for you, his father said. Izuku thought about that and said, thanks, Dad. Let me put Eri to bed. Oh, and before I forget, his father said, tomorrow be prepared to fight. You're going to be a part of the show Professor Aizawa spoke about. As All Might watched his son taking Eri to her room, he began to wonder if he should have started dating to give Izuku a mother. Maybe he might have been less Spartan, like growing up with a woman, giving him more emotional support. Momo woke up early and was in the kitchen, the family chef walking her through making a bento box for Izuku and Eri. She was always a quick learner, but today she was nervous Izuku was going to eat her cooking. What if he doesn't like it? What if he's disappointed? Momo was brought back to reality when the chef began correcting her technique. She began to focus, and shortly after she was done, she had even made sure to pack an apple for Eri. Once she was done, she got ready for school. Izuku woke Eri up to get ready for school. Eri actually stayed in her room all night. This made Izuku happy. She's getting better soon. He knew he would have to look into getting her enrolled in a normal school, so she could get used to being around children her age. All Might walked in and said breakfast is ready. When his work phone went off, and he said, I have to go, and was gone in a blur. Izuku realized that they didn't have time to pack a lunch, and said it looks cafeteria lunch today. When Eri walked into the class, Momo called her over. She let go of Izuku's hand and walked over to her. Momo asked her if she knew what her daddy liked doing. Eri smiled and said he likes working out. He does it every morning before school. He likes playing with me in the park. Oh, and he likes singing, Eri said. Momo looked at Eri and asked, would you and your daddy like to have lunch with me? Eri said, I would let me ask my daddy, and took off. Izuku walked over to Momo and said, I couldn't impose, your parents are here, and I'm sure they want to spend their time with you. Momo said her parents had a meeting they couldn't get out of at that time, and she made them a bento box. Izuku smiled and said okay. Professor Aizawa walked into the room and said, Izuku, go prepare yourself. As for everyone else, please lead you parents to the gym. We'll be there with rest of the freshman classes, he continued. Momo called out to Eri to join her. Izuku kissed her head and said, go with Momo, you can't go with me to the locker room. Eri hopped off his lap and walked over to Momo. Izuku got up and left for the locker room. As everyone filed out of the class, Momo's mom asked Eri, can your daddy sing? Eri smiled and said, yes, he is very good. Everyone got up and clapped yesterday when he finished singing. Yesterday, Momo asked. Yes, Eri said, we went to a place where you sing. When Pony sang, it made me and my daddy cry. She even kissed him on his forehead. Momo's heart dropped. Pony kissed Izuku, and he didn't move. Momo's mom placed her hand on Momo's shoulder and looked at the bento box she was carrying, and Momo knew that she needed to let Izuku know how she felt, and she would do it today. The parents lined the second level of the gym, and 4 students were in the gym proper. 1 stood in each corner, 3 seniors, and Izuku, then a blur shot into the gym and stood in the center of the gym. All Might in his Silver Age costume. He shouted out, it's fine now. Why? Because I am here. Everyone cheered, even the parents. All Might smiled and said, these are some of UA's top fighters, and today they're going to show you some of their talents. The prize for the student that does the best is a one-on-one fight with me. Mirio Togata, Nijire Hado, Tamaki Yamajiki, and Izuku Yagi looked at All Might with surprise. Miro was excited. Nijire was nervous. She wanted to do well, but she didn't want to fight All Might. Tamaki pulled his hood over his head and was sick to his stomach. He didn't want to be around so many people. Izuku wanted to win. He hasn't been able to spar with his father since the class trip. Bakugo began to feel his anger rising once again. Izuku was out in the spotlight, getting the chance to fight All Might. How is he ranked a better fighter when he hasn't fought anyone in the class? Just because he fought those Noma doesn't make him a better fighter. Cementos walked into the center of the gym and set up an obstacle course with targets that the students needed to take down. Once he was done, he said the student that takes down the target with the fastest time wins. Each student went up when their name was called with all but one doing their best. At the end, the results were in 4th place, Tamaki Amajiki. In 3rd place, Nijire Hado. In 2nd place, Mirio Togata. In 1st place by 0.3 of a second, Izuku Yagi. Bakugo was enraged. How did that loser win? I bet those are the worst of the senior class, just placed there to make Izuku look better, he thought. Eri yelled, my daddy won. That's my daddy. Izuku looked up and smiled and waved to Eri. Pony stood there. She prayed for Izuku to win. Her heart raced as he took one target down after another. She loved that look of focus he had when he had his heart set on something. She began to blush when he looked at her and smiled. She felt her mother's hand on her shoulder. That kiss left a very strong impression on him, her mother said. Pony turned crimson as she smiled. Achiko and Tu were standing next to each other cheering for Izuku, and when he won, they both bounced with joy until they saw how Pony reacted when Izuku smiled at her. Both were confused. Did something happen? They were snapped back to reality when Professor Aizawa said, for the next event, for your safety, we're going to move this next event to the arena. Izuku floated up to Eri on a large piece of concrete and said, Professor Aizawa wants to show you something when you get to the arena, okay? Then he looked at Momo and smiled and said, I'm looking forward to having lunch with you, before he shot toward the area like a bullet. So, this was the end of part 2 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.